Elena Vale's pristine white wedding dress felt like a shroud as she walked down the long aisle toward a man she had never chosen. Waiting for her at the end of the hallway was Damian Vesper, a ruthless crime boss whose reputation was forged in blood and tears. Her father's gambling debts had bought Damian a wife. Elena understood instantly the terrifying truth. This marriage wasn't love, it was possession. Could she survive in this dark criminal world? Or would she destroy it from within? Follow my story to the end, like and comment on the city you're viewing to let me know how far this story has progressed. The ceremony lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Elena knew because she counted every breath, every second that ticked by while the officiant's voice droned on like white noise against the thundering of her own heartbeat. She didn't look at Damian Vesper during those 4 minutes. She couldn't. Instead, she focused on the marble floor beneath her feet, the cold seeping through the thin soles of her borrowed heels, wondering if this was how livestock felt being led to slaughter. Her father hadn't even had the decency to attend. Marcus Vale had sold her like a used car to settle his debts, then disappeared the same night the deal was struck. No goodbye. No apology. Just a note on the kitchen counter that said, "You'll understand someday." She'd burned it in the sink at 3 in the morning, watching the edges curl and blacken while her mother sobbed in the next room. Now here she stood, 23 years old, in a dress that cost more than her college tuition, about to become Mrs. Damian Vesper. The name itself carried weight in Chicago, whispered in back rooms, feared in boardrooms, the kind of name that made cops look the other way and politicians return phone calls within the hour. "The rings," the officiant said. A man in a black suit appeared beside Damian, moving with the silent efficiency of someone trained to kill. He held out a small velvet box. Damian took the ring without looking, his fingers steady as a surgeon's. When he reached for Elena's hand, she flinched. It was barely noticeable. A slight pull back, a fraction of a second. But in that cavernous room filled with witnesses who'd seen every kind of human weakness, it might as well have been a scream. Damian's grip tightened. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind her that running wasn't an option. His thumb pressed against her pulse point as he slid the ring onto her finger, a massive diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light like shards of ice. It was beautiful. It was a shackle. "You may kiss the bride." Elena's stomach lurched. This was it. The moment that would seal everything. She forced herself to look up, to meet Damian's eyes for the first time since she'd entered the room. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe. Dark hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so cold. Sharp jawline, full lips, eyes the color of gunmetal that revealed absolutely nothing. He looked at her the way someone might examine a piece of property before purchase, assessing value, calculating worth. The kiss was brief, clinical. His lips touched hers with all the passion of a business transaction, which is exactly what this was. When he pulled back, Elena tasted copper. She'd bitten the inside of her cheek hard enough to draw blood. Applause echoed through the room, polite, measured, the kind of clapping you'd hear at a funeral, not a wedding. "Congratulations, Mr. Vesper," someone said. Damian nodded, his hand still wrapped around Elena's like a vice. He led her down the aisle, past faces she didn't recognize. Men in expensive suits, women dripping in jewelry that probably cost more than most people's houses. They all watched her with varying degrees of pity and curiosity. "Poor thing," their expressions said. "Another lamb for the slaughter." The car waiting outside was a black Mercedes with windows so tinted Elena couldn't see through them. A driver held the door open. She hesitated at the threshold, her last moment of freedom before stepping into the vehicle that would carry her away from everything she'd ever known. "Get in," Damian said. Not a request. Elena got in. The interior smelled like leather and something else, expensive cologne mixed with the faint metallic scent of gun oil. Damian slid in beside her, and the door closed with a sound like a bank vault sealing shut. The driver didn't ask for a destination. He simply started driving. They rode in silence for 7 blocks. Elena counted those too, watching the city slide past through the tinted glass. Saturday afternoon in Chicago, couples walking hand in hand, families heading to dinner. Normal people living normal lives while she sat beside a man who probably had a body count higher than her age. "Your mother will be taken care of," Damian said suddenly. Elena's head snapped toward him. "What?" "Your mother." He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on something outside the window. Medical bills paid, new apartment. Security detail to make sure your father's other creditors don't come looking for payment. She'll be comfortable. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like another chain being locked into place. He was telling her the cost of rebellion, not just her own life, but her mother's comfort. Maybe her mother's safety. "I didn't ask you to do that," Elena said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I know." Now he did look at her, and something flickered across his face too quickly to read. "But you were thinking it. How to protect her. How to keep her safe from the fallout of your father's stupidity." "You don't know what I was thinking." "Don't I?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile. "You're angry, scared, already planning how to survive this. Smart enough to know that martyrdom won't help anyone, but still looking for the exits. Wondering if you could jump out of this car at the next red light, if you'd make it 3 blocks before my men caught you." Elena's breath caught. He'd read her like a book. "The answer is no," Damian continued calmly. "You wouldn't make it 1 block. And even if you did, where would you go? Back to your mother's apartment? To a friend's house? I own half the cops in this city, Elena. The other half are too scared to get involved. There's no safe place that I can't reach." The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the Chicago skyline rising up like jagged teeth against the afternoon sky. Elena recognized the neighborhood. Expensive, exclusive, the kind of place where penthouses sold for tens of millions and doormen knew better than to ask questions. "So that's it?" Elena heard herself say. "I'm just supposed to accept this? Play the obedient wife?" Damian's expression didn't change. "No." The single word hung in the air between them. "No? I don't need an obedient wife," Damian said. "I need someone who can survive in my world. Someone smart enough to know when to speak and when to stay silent. Someone who won't fall apart the first time things get bloody." "Things get bloody?" "Things are always bloody." He said it like he was commenting on the weather. "I have enemies, Elena. Rival organizations that would love nothing more than to see me dead. Politicians who take my money but would throw me to the wolves if the price was right. Associates who smile to my face and plot behind my back. This life," he gestured vaguely at the car, the city, everything. "It's not a game. It's war. Constant, brutal. And you're part of it now, whether you like it or not." The car pulled up to a gleaming high-rise that stretched 40 stories into the sky. The driver got out and opened Elena's door. She didn't move. "What if I can't be what you need?" she asked quietly. For the first time, something almost resembling emotion crossed Damian's face. Not sympathy exactly, more like recognition. "Then you'll die," he said simply. "But I don't think you will. Your father was a weak, pathetic gambler who couldn't control his impulses. Your mother enabled him for 20 years, but you," his eyes met hers, "you're different. I saw your college transcripts. Perfect GPA, full scholarship, worked 2 jobs to help pay your mother's medical bills, while your father was pissing away everything at the poker tables. You're a survivor, Elena. You just don't know it yet." He got out of the car and waited. Elena stared at the open door, at the building beyond, at the life she was about to step into. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But where? To what? He was right. There was nowhere to go that he couldn't reach. So she got out of the car. The lobby was all marble and mirrors, the kind of ostentatious wealth that made Elena's stomach turn. A private elevator required a keycard. Damian swiped his, and the doors opened immediately. They rode up in silence, Elena watching the numbers climb. 38, 39, 40. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that took up the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago, stretching out in every direction. Lake Michigan glittered in the afternoon sun. The furniture was modern and sparse, black leather, chrome fixtures, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. It was beautiful. It was sterile. It felt like a museum, not a home. "Your room is down the hall," Damian said, shrugging off his jacket. Underneath, he wore a shoulder holster with a matte black pistol. He saw her staring. "You'll get used to it." "Will I?" "You will." He walked to a bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of something amber. He didn't offer her any. "There are rules. Learn them fast." "Rules," Elena repeated numbly. "You don't leave the building without security. You don't talk to anyone I haven't vetted. You don't make phone calls without me knowing who you're calling. You see someone watching you, you tell me immediately. You hear something that sounds wrong, you tell me. You feel like something's off, you tell me. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected, Damian corrected, taking a sip of his drink. There's a difference. My enemies would love to get their hands on you, use you as leverage, hurt you to hurt me. The rules keep you alive. How considerate. His eyes flashed, the first real emotion she'd seen from him. Anger, but controlled, leashed. You think I'm the villain in this story, Elena? Fine. Hate me. Resent me. Plot ways to kill me in your sleep. But understand this. I'm the only thing standing between you and a shallow grave. Your father didn't just owe me money. He owed people far worse than me. People who wouldn't have settled for a marriage arrangement. They would have taken you anyway, used you, and dumped your body in the Chicago River when they were done. What? The words hit her like a physical blow. Elena sank onto the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. At least give me the dignity of honesty, she whispered. You didn't marry me to save me. You married me because I was collateral, a possession. Don't dress it up as protection. Damian set his glass down carefully. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her, bringing their faces level. Up close, she could see the scars, a thin white line along his jaw, another above his left eyebrow. Battle marks. You're right, he said quietly. I married you because your father owed me $2 million and a wife was worth more than his corpse. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let anyone hurt you. You're mine now, Elena, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it sparked something else. Anger, hot and bright and clarifying. I'm not a thing to be owned. No, Damian agreed. You're a person who's going to learn how to survive in a world that eats people like you for breakfast, starting tomorrow. He stood and walked away, leaving Elena sitting in the chair, her wedding dress pooling around her like a white flag of surrender. Tomorrow? She called after him. Damian paused at the entrance to what she assumed was his office. Tomorrow, you start training. Roman will teach you self-defense, weapons, situational awareness. You'll learn the players in this city, who's allied with me, who wants me dead, who's playing both sides. You'll learn how to read a room, how to spot a threat, how to survive a kidnapping attempt. Why would I need to know any of that? Because, Damian said, his voice carrying across the vast space, eventually you'll have to attend events with me, fundraisers, business dinners, negotiations, and at some point someone will try to use you against me. When that happens, I need to know you won't fold. He disappeared into his office, leaving Elena alone in the penthouse that was now her cage. She sat there for a long time, watching the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire, like blood. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, willing them to stop, but they wouldn't. A door opened down the hall. A woman emerged, maybe 40, dressed in simple black clothing. She approached Elena carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Mrs. Vesper, she said softly. I'm Anna. I manage the household. If you need anything, I need to get out of this dress, Elena interrupted, her voice cracking. Please, I need to get out of this dress right now. Anna's expression softened. Of course, follow me. The bedroom Anna led her to was enormous, king-sized bed, walk-in closet already filled with clothes Elena had never seen before, attached bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. It was a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. The clothes are all your size, Anna said, opening the closet. Mr. Vesper had them selected based on your measurements. If there's anything you don't like, how did he get my measurements? Anna hesitated. Mr. Vesper is very thorough, ma'am. Of course he was. He'd probably been planning this for weeks, maybe months. While Elena had been living her normal life, going to class, working her shifts at the coffee shop, studying for finals, Damian Vesper had been orchestrating her acquisition like a corporate takeover. I'll leave you to change, Anna said. Dinner's at 7. Mr. Vesper prefers to eat in his office, but he's requested you join him tonight. When she was alone, Elena tore off the wedding dress with shaking hands. She wanted to rip it, to shred it into pieces, but even in her anger, she was too practical. It probably cost a fortune. Destroying it would accomplish nothing. She pulled on jeans and a sweater from the closet, Both fit perfectly, which only made her angrier, and went to the window. 40 stories up. Even if she could somehow get it open, jumping wasn't an option, not unless she wanted to decorate the sidewalk. Her phone was gone. Anna had probably taken it while Elena was changing. No way to call for help, not that anyone could help her anyway. Elena caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked pale, haunted. The girl staring back at her was still recognizable, but something had already changed, something in the eyes. "You're a survivor," she whispered to her reflection, repeating Damian's words. "You just don't know it yet." But the truth was uglier than that. Elena did know. She'd been surviving her whole life, her father's addiction, her mother's illness, the constant financial pressure that made every day feel like walking a tightrope. She'd survived by being smart, being careful, being invisible. None of those skills would help her here. At 6:45, there was a knock on her door. Elena opened it to find a man built like a tank standing in the hallway. He had to be 6'5", 250, with a shaved head and eyes that swept the hallway constantly, even though they were 40 stories up, with elevator access only. "Mrs. Vesper," he said in accented English. "Eastern European," Elena guessed. "I'm Roman Dragic. I'll be handling your security and training. Mr. Vesper is waiting for you." "I know where his office is." Nevertheless, Roman gestured down the hall, making it clear she'd be escorted whether she liked it or not. Damian's office was smaller than she'd expected, but no less intimidating. Multiple computer monitors showed security feeds from cameras positioned throughout the building, and she realized with growing unease several other locations around the city. A weapons cabinet was visible through a half-open door. Papers covered his desk, business documents mixed with what looked like surveillance photos. He glanced up when she entered. He changed out of his wedding suit into dark slacks and a button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. The shoulder holster was still in place. "Sit," he said, indicating a chair across from his desk. Elena remained standing. "I'm not a dog." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or approval? "No, you're not. Sit anyway. We need to talk." She sat, but only because her legs were tired from standing in heels all day. Damian pushed a folder across the desk toward her. Elena opened it and immediately wished she hadn't. Photos. Dozens of them. Crime scenes. Bodies. Some of the images were so graphic she had to look away. "What is this?" she demanded. "Reality," Damian said flatly. "These are people who got in my way, or thought they could betray me, or were in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is the world you're part of now, Elena. I need you to understand what's at stake." Elena forced herself to look at the photos again. Really look. A man in a dumpster, throat cut. A woman in a car, bullet hole in her temple. A teenager who couldn't have been more than 19, beaten beyond recognition. "You did this?" she whispered. "Some of it. Most of it was done by people who work for me. Some was done by my enemies." He leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "The question is, can you live with it? Do I have a choice?" "There's always a choice. You can refuse to adapt, refuse to learn, refuse to become what this world requires, and you'll die. Probably within a year. Someone will kidnap you, and I'll get your finger in a box with a ransom note, or your father's other creditors will find you despite my protection, or one of my rivals will use you to get to me." He paused. "Or you can decide to survive. Learn the rules. Learn the players. Learn how to be dangerous." Elena closed the folder, unable to look at the images anymore. "And if I become what you want? What then? I just accept being a criminal's wife? Smile at fundraisers while knowing the money comes from drugs and murder?" "Drugs are a small part of my business," Damian said mildly. "I deal primarily in information, leverage, and real estate. Though I won't pretend my hands are clean. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you informed." He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "In 6 months, there's a gathering. The major players from every criminal organization in the Midwest. It's part business negotiation, part showing of force. Everyone brings their people, their captains, their enforcers, their families. I need you there with me." "Why?" "But because showing up without you would signal weakness. It would tell everyone that I can't control my own wife, that I'm vulnerable. And in my world, vulnerability gets you killed." He turned to face her. I need you to look the part, act the part, convince everyone in that room that you're exactly where you want to be." Elena laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even her. "You want me to pretend I'm happy about being sold into marriage?" "I want you to pretend you're powerful," Damian corrected. "There's a difference. Happy is irrelevant. Power is everything." "I don't have any power." "Not yet, but you will. If you're smart, if you pay attention, if you learn." He moved closer, and Elena fought the urge to retreat. "The wife of Damian Vesper isn't powerless, Elena. You have access, information. You hear things, see things. You become someone people want to impress or fear. That's leverage, then that's power." "And what do I do with this power, assuming I even want it?" Damian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Whatever you want, within reason. You want your mother in a better facility? Done. You want your father found and dealt with? I'll make it happen. You want revenge on the people who put you in this position? I can arrange that too." The offer was tempting, more tempting than Elena wanted to admit. She'd spent years watching her mother suffer while her father gambled away everything, years feeling powerless, and now this man was offering her the tools to actually do something about it. But at what cost? "I need time," she said finally. "To think, to process." She gestured vaguely at everything. "All of this. You have until tomorrow morning. Roman will be here at 6 to start your training. I suggest you get some sleep." Elena stood, her legs unsteady. She made it to the door before Damian spoke again. "Elena." She paused, but didn't turn around. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I didn't want it to be this way either. But your father made his choices. Now we both have to live with the consequences." She didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She walked back to her room, Roman following at a discreet distance, and closed the door behind her. Only then did she let herself break down, sliding down the door until she was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. She cried for exactly 5 minutes, timed it on the expensive watch Damian had given her along with the ring. Then she stood up, washed her face, and made herself eat the dinner Anna had left on a tray. Because Damian was right about one thing: she was a survivor. And survivors didn't have the luxury of falling apart. That night, Elena stood at the window of her bedroom, watching Chicago sparkle below like a city of stars. Somewhere down there, her mother was probably lying in a hospital bed, wondering where her daughter was. Somewhere down there, her father was hiding from his debts, leaving her to pay the price. And here she was, 40 stories above it all, married to a man who dealt in violence and fear. Elena pressed her hand against the glass, feeling the cold seep through. She thought about Damian's words, about power, about survival, about becoming dangerous. The question wasn't whether she could do it. The question was whether she was willing to. Because once she crossed that line, once she accepted this world and learned its rules, there would be no going back. The innocent girl who'd walked into that ceremony would be gone forever, replaced by someone harder, someone colder, someone who could survive. In the reflection of the window, Elena barely recognized herself. The wedding ring caught the light, heavy on her finger. A shackle. A symbol. A promise of the darkness to come. She thought about the photos in Damian's office. The bodies, the blood, the brutal reality of the world she'd been forced into. Then she thought about her mother, about her father's betrayal, about every person who'd ever looked at her with pity and assumed she was weak. Something shifted inside her. A door closing. Or maybe opening. "If I can't escape this world," Elena whispered to her reflection, "then I'll learn to survive it. And when I'm strong enough, when I understand the rules and the players and the game, I'll burn it all down from the inside." The words felt like a vow, a declaration of war against the circumstances that had tried to break her. Behind her, the bedroom door was locked. Guards patrolled the hallway. Security cameras watched every corner. Damian Vesper controlled every aspect of her life now. But he couldn't control what she was thinking, what she was planning, what she was willing to become. Elena turned away from the window and began going through the closet Anna had filled. Designer clothes, expensive shoes, everything she'd need to play the part of a crime boss's wife. She selected an outfit for tomorrow, simple, practical, something she could move in. If Roman was going to train her to survive, she needed to be ready. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by nightmares of the photos she'd seen and the ceremony that had sealed her fate. But when 6 a.m. came and Roman knocked on her door, Elena was already awake, already dressed, already waiting. "Good morning, Mrs. Vesper," Roman said when she opened the door. His expression was neutral, professional. "Are you ready to begin?" Elena looked at him, this massive man who could probably kill her with his bare hands, who worked for a monster who was about to teach her how to become dangerous. "Yes," she said, and meant it. Roman led her to a room she hadn't seen before, a private gym complete with weights, training mats, and a section that looked disturbingly like a shooting range. Damian was already there, dressed in workout clothes, looking far more human than he had in his wedding suit. "I'll be observing your first session," he said. "I need to assess where you're starting from." Elena wanted to tell him to go to hell. Instead, she said, "Fine." Roman started with basics: stance, balance, how to throw a punch without breaking her own hand. It was humiliating at first. She'd never been athletic, never learned to fight. Every move felt awkward and wrong, but she kept trying. An hour in, her muscles were screaming, sweat dripped down her back. Roman had thrown her to the mat at least a dozen times. "Again," he said. Elena got up. Again. From the corner of the gym, Damian watched without expression, taking notes, evaluating, calculating her worth. "Let him," Elena thought grimly. "Let him think he knows what I'm capable of." Because the truth was, even she didn't know yet. But she was going to find out. After 2 hours, Roman finally called a break. Elena collapsed onto a bench, her lungs burning, her body aching in places she didn't know could ache. "You did well," Roman said, and it sounded like he actually meant it. "Better than I expected." "High praise," Elena muttered. "It is." He handed her a water bottle. "Most people give up after the first fall. You got back up every time." Damian approached, and Elena forced herself not to flinch away. "Roman's right," he said. "You're stronger than you think, but strength isn't enough. Tomorrow, we start tactical training, threat assessment, how to read a room, how to know when someone's lying." "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked, too tired to filter her words. "If I'm just property, why invest this much time and effort?" Damian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Because property breaks. People adapt. And I need you to be the latter." He walked away, leaving Elena alone with Roman and her aching muscles and the growing realization that she'd just taken the first step down a path she could never return from. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in front of a mirror in another expensive dress, preparing for her first public appearance as Damian Vesper's wife. A charity gala. Nothing too dangerous, Damian had assured her. Just a test run. Anna had done her makeup, styled her hair. Elena barely recognized herself. She looked older, harder. The kind of woman who might actually belong on Damian's arm. "You ready?" Damian appeared in the doorway, dressed in a tuxedo that probably cost more than a car. He looked every inch the legitimate businessman, not a crime lord. "Do I have a choice?" "Always." He offered his arm. "But I'd prefer if you came willingly." Elena took his arm because refusing would accomplish nothing. They rode down to the lobby where the Mercedes waited. More security than before, 3 additional vehicles full of armed men who would follow them to the event. The gala was held at one of Chicago's most prestigious hotels. Cameras flashed as they entered. Elena smiled reflexively, the way Anna had taught her. Confident but not arrogant. Warm but not weak. Inside, the ballroom glittered with wealth. Politicians, business leaders, people who ran the city from the shadows. And scattered throughout, faces Elena had been taught to recognize during her tactical training. Damian's associates, his rivals. People who smiled while plotting his death. "Stay close," Damian murmured. "Watch everyone. Trust no one." They moved through the crowd like dancers who'd practiced this routine for years. Damian introduced her to person after person, names Elena would never remember, faces she filed away according to threat level. Green for allies, yellow for neutral, red for danger. She was smiling at a city councilman when she felt it. A shift in the air, a presence that set off every alarm bell Roman had drilled into her. Elena's eyes swept the room and locked onto a man across the ballroom. 50s. Silver hair, expensive suit, flanked by bodyguards who were trying and failing to look casual. Her pulse quickened. Red. Definitely red. "Who is that?" she whispered to Damian. He followed her gaze, and his grip on her waist tightened almost imperceptibly. Victor Karzin. Good eye. Rival? The rival. He controls the south side. We've been at peace for 3 years, but it's a cold peace. He'd love nothing more than to see me dead. As if sensing their attention, Victor's gaze shifted to meet theirs. He smiled, cold, calculating, and raised his glass in a mock toast. Then he started walking toward them. "What do I do?" Elena asked, fighting to keep her breathing steady. "Exactly what you've been trained to do," Damian said calmly. "Smile, listen, remember everything he says." Victor Karzin approached with the confidence of a man who owned the world. Up close, Elena could see the cruelty in his eyes, the violence poorly disguised beneath a veneer of sophistication. "Damian," Victor said smoothly, "I heard you'd taken a wife. I had to see for myself." "Victor," Damian's voice was cordial but cold. "How unexpected." "Is it? We travel in the same circles." Victor turned his attention to Elena, and she felt the weight of his assessment, like being examined by a predator. "And you must be the lucky bride. Elena, isn't it?" "Mrs. Vesper," Elena corrected, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Victor's smile widened. "Of course. How rude of me. Tell me, Mrs. Vesper, are you enjoying married life?" It was a trap. Whatever she said, he'd use against them. Claim she was unhappy, signal weakness. Claim she was content, and he'd know she was lying. Elena met his eyes directly. "I'm enjoying learning the landscape of my husband's world. So many fascinating players, so many interesting dynamics." Something flickered across Victor's face. Surprise, maybe. He'd expected a frightened girl, not someone who could hold her own in conversation. "Indeed," he said slowly. "Well, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. Damian, we should talk soon. There are developments that require discussion." "My office, Monday." Victor nodded and walked away, but Elena could feel his attention still on them, heavy as a physical weight. "You did well," Damian said quietly, but Elena barely heard him, because across the ballroom Victor had rejoined his group, and they were all watching her now, assessing, calculating, planning. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Elena understood the true cost of being Damian Vesper's wife. She wasn't just trapped in his world. She was a target in everyone else's. The Monday meeting with Victor Karzin never happened. At 4 a.m., 3 days after the gala, Elena woke to the sound of Damian's voice cutting through the darkness like a blade. He wasn't in bed, hadn't been when she'd fallen asleep either. His side of the mattress was cold. "I don't care what it costs," he was saying, his voice carrying from the office down the hall. "Find out who leaked the shipment schedule, find them, and bring them to me alive." Elena sat up slowly, her training kicking in automatically. "Listen, assess, remember." She slipped out of bed and moved to the doorway, staying in the shadows. Damian paced his office like a caged animal, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand clenched into a fist. He'd been wearing the same clothes since yesterday. His jaw was tight with barely controlled rage. $4 million in product. Gone. And you're telling me it just disappeared?" A pause. "Then someone made it disappear, Marcus. And I want to know who." He ended the call and threw the phone onto his desk hard enough that Elena heard something crack. For a long moment, he just stood there, breathing hard, shoulders rigid with tension. Elena knocked softly on the doorframe. Damian's head snapped toward her, and for a fraction of a second his hand moved toward the gun at his hip. Then he recognized her and forced himself to relax. "You should be sleeping," he said. "Hard to sleep when you're yelling." Elena stepped into the office. "What happened?" "Nothing that concerns you." "We both know that's not true. Everything in your world concerns me now. You made sure of that." Damian studied her for a long moment, something calculating happening behind his eyes. Then he made a decision. "Someone intercepted one of my shipments, $4 million worth of pharmaceutical supplies that were supposed to be delivered to hospitals across 3 states. "Pharmaceutical supplies?" Elena's voice was flat. "Is that what we're calling it?" "That's what it is. I'm not a drug dealer, Elena. I told you. I deal in information and leverage. This was a legitimate shipment of medical equipment and prescription medications. Legal, documented, except someone knew exactly when and where it would be, and they hit the convoy before it reached the distribution center. Elena moved closer, reading his body language the way Roman had taught her. And you think it was Victor? I know it was Victor. This has his fingerprints all over it. He's testing me, seeing if I'll retaliate, seeing if I'm weak. Are you going to retaliate? Damian's smile was cold enough to frost glass. What do you think? Before Elena could respond, Roman appeared in the doorway, moving with that uncanny silence for such a large man. We have a location on the convoy, abandoned warehouse on the south side, Victor's territory. Of course it is. Damian grabbed his jacket. Get the team together. I want 20 men, full tactical gear. We're getting my product back. Damian. Elena's voice stopped him at the door. If you go into Victor's territory with 20 armed men, that's an act of war. You'll start something you might not be able to finish. Then what do you suggest? The question came out sharp, challenging. I let him steal from me? Let him think I'm too scared to respond. Elena thought fast, her mind racing through the tactical scenarios Roman had drilled into her. Territory disputes, power plays, the psychology of criminal hierarchies. You're right that you can't let this go, she said slowly. But going in with an army makes you look desperate, like you're overcompensating. And you said Victor is testing you, so test him back. Go alone. Just you. Walk into his territory, into his warehouse, and take back what's yours. That's not desperation, that's power. Roman made a sound that might have been a laugh or a warning. That's suicide. No, Damian said, still watching Elena with that calculating expression. That's interesting. Explain. Elena's pulse hammered, but she kept her voice steady. Victor expects you to come in hot, guns blazing, making noise. That's what he wants. It gives him the excuse to escalate, to rally his people against the threat of Damian Vesper's aggression. But if you walk in alone, unarmed, and demand your property back, that's not aggression, that's confidence. It tells everyone watching that you don't need an army to handle Victor Karzin. It also tells everyone watching that I'm an idiot with a death wish. Does it? Or does it tell them you know something they don't, that you have leverage over Victor that makes you untouchable? Elena took a breath. You said this business runs on perception, so control the perception. Make Victor look like the desperate one, the thief who got caught. Damian was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. Then he turned to Roman. What do you think? I think she's either brilliant or insane, Roman said flatly. Possibly both, but she's not wrong about the optics. Going in with 20 men looks like weakness disguised as strength. Going in alone looks like you know something everyone else doesn't. I do know something, Damian said. I know Victor's daughter is getting married next month to a councilman's son. I know that marriage is supposed to cement Victor's political connections. And I know the councilman has been taking money from 3 different organizations, including mine. If that information became public, the wedding falls apart, and Victor loses the alliance he's been building for 2 years. Elena felt something shift in her understanding. This was how Damian operated. Information, leverage, always 3 moves ahead. So you walk in there, she said, and you tell Victor you want your shipment back. And if he refuses, you make it very clear what the consequences will be. Not violence, not war, just information going to the wrong people at the wrong time. Damian smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it looked genuine. You're learning. I had a good teacher. Several. He checked his watch. It's almost 5. Victor will be at the warehouse by 6. He always personally oversees his acquisitions. Roman, you'll take the team and position them 2 blocks out. If this goes wrong, I want immediate extraction. This is still a terrible idea, Roman muttered, but he was already moving toward the door. Damian turned back to Elena. Go back to bed. This doesn't concern you anymore. The hell it doesn't. The words came out before Elena could stop them. You just used my strategy. That makes it my concern. Using your strategy doesn't make you part of the operation. Then why did you ask for my opinion in the first place? Elena moved closer, and something in her had changed since that first night. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. Or maybe she was, but she'd learned to function through the fear. You want me to survive in your world. You want me to be smart, to think tactically, to understand the game. But then you shut me out when things get real. You can't have it both ways. Damian's jaw tightened. This is dangerous, Elena. Real danger. Not training exercises with Roman. Not charity galas, where the worst that happens is an uncomfortable conversation. If Victor decides to kill me, you don't want to be anywhere near that warehouse. And if he kills you, where does that leave me? You think Victor will just let me go? I'm leverage, remember? I'm valuable. Which means I'm a target, whether I'm at that warehouse or sitting here in this penthouse. She had him, and they both knew it. Damian, Elena said quietly, you told me I needed to become dangerous. Let me start learning how. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, impossibly, he laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. You're going to get us both killed. Probably. Is that a yes? It's a yes. But you stay in the car with Roman's team. You don't get out. You don't interfere. You watch and you learn. And if things go wrong, you let Roman get you out. Understood? Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Because she'd just won an argument with Damian Vesper, and some part of her recognized that as a shift in their dynamic, a crack in the foundation of his absolute control. She wasn't his prisoner anymore. She was becoming his partner. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like power. They left at 5:30, a convoy of 3 vehicles moving through Chicago's empty streets like sharks through dark water. Elena rode in the second car with Roman and 2 other men whose names she'd learned during training, Alexei and Marcus. Both ex-military, both utterly loyal to Damian. If shooting starts, Roman said, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency, you get on the floor and you stay there until I say otherwise. Clear? Clear. The warehouse was exactly what Elena expected. Concrete and rust and broken windows. The kind of place where bad things happened away from cameras and witnesses. Dawn was just starting to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink that seemed obscene given what was about to happen. Damian's car pulled up directly in front of the warehouse entrance. The other vehicles positioned themselves at strategic points around the perimeter, close enough to respond, far enough to maintain the illusion that Damian had come alone. Elena watched through tinted windows as Damian got out of his car. No weapon visible. No armor. Just a man in an expensive suit walking into enemy territory like he owned it. He's insane, Marcus muttered. He's Damian Vesper, Roman said, which apparently explained everything. The warehouse door was already open. Damian walked through it without hesitation, disappearing into the darkness beyond. 60 seconds passed, then 90. Elena counted her heartbeats, each one louder than the last. Something's wrong, she said. Roman didn't look at her. Give it time. It's been too quiet. No shouting, no threats, nothing. That could be good. Or it could mean they grabbed him the second he walked in. Elena's hand moved to the door handle. We should wait, Roman said firmly, like Damian ordered. But Elena's instincts, the ones that had kept her alive through her father's chaos and her mother's illness and 2 months of brutal tactical training, were screaming that something was wrong. She'd learned to read situations, to spot threats, to trust the feeling in her gut when danger was close. And right now her gut said Damian was in trouble. Before Roman could stop her, Elena opened the car door and stepped out. Elena! Roman's voice was sharp with warning, but she was already moving, staying low, using the vehicles for cover the way he'd taught her. She heard Roman swear viciously behind her, then the sound of car doors opening as the team scrambled to follow. But Elena was faster, adrenaline making her quick, and she reached the warehouse entrance before anyone could pull her back. Inside the warehouse was a maze of shipping containers and abandoned equipment, lit by harsh industrial lights that turned everything gray and colorless. Elena moved through the shadows, her breathing controlled, her senses hyper-alert. Then she heard Damian's voice, calm and cold. I'm not asking, Victor. I'm telling you. Return the shipment, or the information about your daughter's wedding goes public tonight. You think I'm afraid of you? That was Victor, his accent thicker with anger. You walk into my territory making threats? You're either brave or stupid. I'm neither. I'm practical. You took something that belongs to me. I want it back. This doesn't have to become complicated. Elena crept closer, positioning herself behind a stack of pallets, where she could see without being seen. The scene that emerged made her blood run cold. Damian stood in the center of a clear space, surrounded by at least 15 of Victor's men, all armed, all pointed at him. Victor himself stood on a shipping container above the floor, looking down like a king surveying his domain. But what made Elena's stomach drop was the figure tied to a chair off to the side, barely visible in the shadows. A woman, beaten, bloody, barely conscious. Elena didn't recognize her at first. Then the woman lifted her head slightly and Elena saw her face, her mother. The world tilted. Elena's vision tunneled, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. This wasn't possible. Her mother was supposed to be safe, protected. Damian had promised. "You see, Damian," Victor said, his voice dripping with satisfaction, "I did some research on your new bride. Found out some interesting things, like how much she cares about her sick mother, how she used to visit every day before you locked her away in that tower of yours." Damian's expression didn't change, but Elena saw his hands clench almost imperceptibly. "The woman has nothing to do with this, doesn't she? I think she has everything to do with this. You want your shipment back? Fine. I'll trade you. 4 million in product for Elena Vesper. Have her here by noon or Mommy Dearest starts losing fingers." Elena's mind raced. This changed everything. Victor hadn't just stolen product. He'd declared war. And he'd chosen the one weapon guaranteed to get a reaction. Her. "You know I can't do that," Damian said, and something in his voice made Elena's chest tighten. Not fear, something else. "Elena is under my protection. If I hand her over, I look weak. If I look weak, I'm dead within a month. You know the rules, Victor." "Then I guess your conscience will have to live with what happens to this woman." Victor nodded to one of his men, who pulled out a pair of bolt cutters. Elena didn't think. She stepped out of the shadows, her voice cutting through the warehouse like a gunshot. "Victor!" Every head turned toward her. 15 guns swung in her direction. Victor's expression shifted from satisfaction to genuine surprise. Behind her, Elena heard Roman swear again, followed by the sound of his team moving into position. But they couldn't fire. Not with Damian in the center of Victor's men, not without starting a massacre that might kill everyone. Damian's face went absolutely still. "Elena, get out of here, now!" She ignored him, walking forward with a confidence she absolutely didn't feel. Her mother looked up, recognition dawning through the pain, her mouth forming Elena's name but no sound coming out. "You want me?" Elena said, looking up at Victor. "Fine. Let my mother go, return Damian's shipment, and I'll stay, voluntarily. No resistance." "Elena, don't!" Damian's voice was sharp with something that might have been panic. "Don't you dare! Why not?" She finally looked at him, and the expression on his face almost broke her resolve. "You said I was learning to think tactically. This is tactical. Victor gets what he wants. My mother goes free. Your product comes back. Everyone wins. Except you," Damian said flatly. "I'm already a prisoner. Does it really matter whose?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Elena saw them land, saw something flash across Damian's face. Hurt maybe, or anger, or some emotion she couldn't name. Victor laughed, delighted. "Oh, this is perfect. The little bride has teeth. I like you, Elena. You're smarter than you look." He gestured to his men. "Let the mother go. Bring the girl up here." "No." Damian's voice cut like a blade. "Victor, you don't want to do this. You think I'll just let you take her? You think I won't burn your entire organization to the ground to get her back? Will you? Because it seems to me like she just volunteered. And if you start a war over a woman who clearly doesn't want to be with you, you look obsessed, weak, emotional. All the things that get men in our position killed." Elena was already moving toward the stairs leading up to Victor's container. Behind her, she heard Damian start forward, heard Roman's quiet command holding him back, heard her mother crying softly, being cut free from the chair. When Elena reached the top of the container, Victor gripped her arm hard enough to bruise. Up close, she could smell alcohol and expensive cologne and something rotten underneath. "You're either very brave or very stupid," Victor said quietly, his breath hot against her face. "Let's find out which." Below them, Damian stood frozen, surrounded by hostile guns, watching Elena with an expression she'd never seen before. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked powerless. "Let her mother go," Elena said, meeting Victor's eyes. "That was the deal. The deal was your cooperation. I need to make sure you'll actually cooperate before I start giving things away. Victor's grip tightened. Damian, you and your men leave. Now. The shipment will be returned to your distribution center by tonight. Consider it a gesture of good faith. But Elena stays with me. For now. For how long? Damian's voice was deadly quiet. As long as I want. Maybe a day, maybe a week, maybe forever. Depends on how entertaining she is. Elena saw Damian's hand move toward his hidden weapon. Saw Roman tense. Saw the entire situation about to explode into violence that would get everyone killed. Damian, she said, and her voice didn't shake even though her entire body was trembling. Go, please. Just go. Their eyes met across the warehouse, and something passed between them. A understanding, a promise, or maybe a goodbye. Damian's jaw clenched so tight Elena thought it might crack. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his movements stiff with suppressed rage. Roman and his team followed, taking Elena's mother with them. She was crying, reaching back toward Elena, but Roman was gentle as he led her away. The warehouse doors closed with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Victor released Elena's arm and smiled. Well, that was easier than I expected. Your husband loves you less than I thought. He's not my husband, Elena said. He's my owner. You said it yourself, I'm property. And property doesn't get loved, it gets used. Smart girl. You understand the game better than most. Victor gestured to his men. Take her to the office and make sure she's comfortable, for now. Two of Victor's men grabbed Elena's arms and dragged her toward a small office at the back of the warehouse. She didn't resist. Resistance would accomplish nothing except getting her hurt. Better to comply, to observe, to look for opportunities. The office was surprisingly well furnished, a desk, leather chairs, a couch that had seen better days. One of Victor's men pushed her onto the couch, while the other positioned himself by the door. Stay, he said, like she was a dog. Elena stayed. She had no choice. But her mind was racing, cataloging everything. The layout of the warehouse, the number of men she'd seen, the exits, the weapons, the security cameras in the corners. She was learning, just like Damian had wanted. Hours passed. Elena sat on the couch, not moving, barely breathing. Through the office window, she could see Victor's men loading containers onto trucks, Damian's stolen shipment being prepared for return, probably. As the sun climbed higher, Victor finally came to the office. He dismissed the guard and sat behind the desk, studying Elena like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. You're not what I expected, he said finally. What did you expect? Some scared little girl who cried and begged. Instead, I get someone who volunteers herself as hostage and tells her husband to abandon her. You're either the smartest person in this warehouse or the dumbest. Why can't I be both? Victor laughed. I like you, Elena. I genuinely do, which makes this unfortunate. Elena's pulse quickened. What's unfortunate? That I'm going to have to kill you eventually, but not yet. First, I'm going to use you to destroy Damian Vesper piece by piece, and you're going to help me do it. I won't. You will. Because the alternative is watching your mother die slowly, and then watching Damian die slowly, and then dying yourself. Victor leaned forward. But if you cooperate, if you tell me everything you know about Damian's operations, his weaknesses, his secrets, I'll make it quick. For all of you. Elena's mind raced. This was the test. The real one. Not survival training with Roman or tactical exercises or charity galas. This was the moment that would define everything. She could betray Damian, tell Victor everything, maybe save her mother, maybe save herself, or she could refuse. Stay loyal to the man who'd bought her like property, who'd trapped her in his world, who'd let her walk into this warehouse to prove a point about power. The choice should have been easy. It wasn't, because somewhere in the past 2 months, something had shifted. Elena had stopped seeing Damian as just a monster. She'd seen him work, seen his intelligence, his brutal logic, the way he protected what was his with absolute ruthlessness, and she'd become what was his. No, Elena said quietly. Victor's expression hardened. No? I won't betray him. I won't tell you anything. Even if it costs your mother's life? Elena's hands shook, but she forced herself to meet Victor's eyes. My mother wouldn't want me to. She raised me better than that. It was a lie. Her mother would absolutely want Elena to save herself. But it was the kind of lie that bought time, that maintained the image Elena was building of herself as someone dangerous enough to respect. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the door. "We'll see how you feel after a few days without food or water, or after I send Damian your mother's body parts. Loyalty is admirable, Elena, but it won't keep you alive." He left, locking the door behind him. Elena was alone. She waited until his footsteps faded, then stood and began searching the office. Drawers, filing cabinets, looking for anything useful. A weapon. A phone. Information. She found a letter opener in the top desk drawer. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. She slipped it into her sleeve. Then she found the files. Shipping manifests, financial records, names and addresses and dates. Victor's entire operation laid out in meticulous detail. Elena's hands trembled as she flipped through page after page. This was leverage. This was power. If she could get this information to Damian, he could destroy Victor completely. But how? She was locked in an office in enemy territory with no phone, no allies, no way out. "Think," she commanded herself. "Think like Damian." What would he do? He'd use what was available. He'd be patient. He'd wait for an opportunity and strike when it presented itself. Elena carefully photographed each page using the security camera's blind spot, then returned the files to exactly where she'd found them. Then she sat back down on the couch and waited. Night fell. No one brought food or water. Elena's throat was dry, her stomach cramping with hunger, but she'd survived worse. Growing up poor had taught her how to function on empty. At midnight, she heard shouting outside. Then gunfire. Elena's heart leaped. The office window faced the warehouse floor, and through it she saw chaos. Victor's men scrambling, muzzle flashes in the darkness, smoke grenades filling the space with choking gray clouds. Damian had come back. The door to the office exploded inward. Roman appeared through the smoke like an avenging angel, his weapon sweeping the room before focusing on Elena. "You okay?" "Fine. My mother?" "Safe. Damian's orders. Get her to a private facility with full security. Now move." Elena ran. Roman led her through the chaos, his body shielding hers from the crossfire. They made it to an exit just as the main warehouse doors burst open and more of Damian's men flooded in. Outside, a car waited. Roman shoved Elena into the back seat and climbed in after her. The driver floored it before the door even closed. "Damian?" Elena asked, her voice hoarse. "Still inside, finishing this." "Roman, I found files. Victor's entire operation. Financial records, shipping routes, everything." Roman's head snapped toward her. "You're sure?" "Positive. I memorized the locations. If we can get back in there..." "We're not going back. Damian's orders were clear. Get you out. Get you safe. Let him handle Victor." The car raced through empty streets, putting distance between them and the warehouse. Elena twisted in her seat, looking back, watching smoke rise into the night sky. 15 minutes later, they pulled up to the penthouse. Roman escorted her to the elevator, his weapon still drawn, his eyes scanning for threats. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now you wait. Damian will come home when he's done." "And if he doesn't?" Roman's expression was grim. "Then you run. As fast and far as you can. Because if Victor kills Damian, you're the next target on his list." The elevator doors opened. Anna was waiting, her face pale with worry. She took one look at Elena and pulled her into a fierce hug. "Thank God," she whispered. "When we heard what happened..." She "I'm fine," Elena said, even though she wasn't. She was shaking. Her legs felt like water. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her hollow and scared. Anna led her to her room and ran a bath. Elena sat in the hot water until her skin was pruned, trying to process everything that had happened. She'd volunteered herself as a hostage. She'd refused to betray Damian. She'd found intelligence that could change everything, and she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Because she'd made a choice. Not survival, not pragmatism, loyalty. To a man who'd bought her, trapped her, turned her into something she didn't recognize, but who'd also come back for her. Who'd launched an assault on enemy territory to get her back. Who'd looked at her across that warehouse with an expression that made her chest tight. Elena climbed out of the bath and dressed in clean clothes. Then she went to Damian's office and waited. 2 hours passed, then 3. At 4 a.m., she heard the elevator. Footsteps in the hall. The office door opened. Damian stood in the doorway, covered in blood that probably wasn't his suit torn, his face expressionless. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. "Is he dead?" Elena asked. "No, but he will be. Soon." Damian crossed to the bar and poured himself a drink. His hands were steady despite everything. "I sent him a message, burned 3 of his warehouses, took back my shipment, made it very clear what happens to people who touch what's mine. I'm not a thing you own. Aren't you?" He turned to face her. "You walked into that warehouse. You offered yourself as trade. You refused to betray me even when he threatened your mother. That sounds like ownership to me. That was tactical, strategic. You said I needed to learn. That was stupid." The glass shattered against the wall, alcohol and crystal exploding in a spray that made Elena flinch. "You could have died. Victor could have killed you just to make a point, and I would have been powerless to stop it. Do you understand that? For 12 hours, I had no control, no leverage, no power. Just the knowledge that if he hurt you, I'd rip his heart out with my bare hands, and it still wouldn't be enough." The raw emotion in his voice stopped Elena cold. This wasn't the controlled, calculating Damian she'd come to know. This was something else. Something real. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "I'm just collateral. You said so yourself." "I know what I said." Damian's voice was rough. "And I was wrong. You're not collateral. You're—" He stopped, his jaw working like the words were physically difficult to say. "You're important. To the operation, to the organization, to you," Elena finished. He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either, just stood there, covered in blood and exhaustion, looking at her like she was a problem he couldn't solve. Elena stood and crossed to him, stood close enough to see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, to smell gunpowder and violence and expensive cologne, close enough to make a choice. "Victor has files," she said quietly, "financial records. Shipping manifests, everything. I found them while I was locked in his office. I can tell you exactly where they are." Something shifted in Damian's expression. "You found his records?" "All of them. Locations, dates, associates, bank accounts, everything you'd need to destroy him completely." Elena. Damian's hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "Do you know what you're giving me? Power. Leverage. The ability to end this war before it destroys us both. And you're sure you want to do this? Once you cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be complicit, an active participant, not a victim anymore." Elena met his eyes. "I stopped being a victim the day I walked into that warehouse. Now I'm making a choice. My choice." Damian stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with an intensity that stole her breath. It wasn't romantic. It was possession and protection and something darker, something that acknowledged they were both too broken to deserve anything better than this. "Tell me everything," he said against her hair. So Elena did. She described the office, the filing cabinets, the exact location of every document she'd seen. Damian listened with absolute focus, his mind already working through strategies, calculating angles, planning Victor's destruction. When she finished, he released her and reached for his phone. "What are you doing?" Elena asked. "Ending this. Tonight. Before Victor realizes what you found." He dialed a number. "Roman, get the team together. Full tactical gear. We're hitting Victor's office in 1 hour." "Damian, wait!" But he was already moving, already shifting into the cold, calculating version of himself that ran a criminal empire with ruthless efficiency. Elena watched him work, making calls, issuing orders, assembling the pieces that would destroy Victor Karzin completely. And she realized with startling clarity that she'd just become exactly what Damian had needed. Not a prisoner, not property, an accomplice. The sun was rising when the team assembled in the penthouse. 20 men, armed to the teeth, waiting for orders. Roman stood at the front, grim-faced but ready. Damian addressed them with brutal simplicity. "Victor Karzin made a mistake. He touched something that belongs to me. Tonight, we're going to make sure everyone in this city understands what happens when you make that mistake. Questions?" No one spoke. "Then let's move." Elena stood at the window, watching the convoy of vehicles pull away from the building, carrying Damian toward what might be his death or his greatest victory. She should have felt relief, fear, something. Instead, she felt nothing but cold calculation. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. In Damian's world, the only way to survive was to become more dangerous than the threats surrounding you. And she was just getting started. 4 hours later, Roman called. The operation had been a success. Victor's office had been hit, his files taken, his operation crippled. Damian had personally delivered a message to Victor: surrender or die. Victor had chosen to run. But running wouldn't save him. Damian had his records, his secrets, his entire organization's infrastructure mapped out in meticulous detail. It was only a matter of time before Victor fell. And when he did, it would be Elena who delivered the killing blow. She stared at her reflection in the window, barely recognizing the woman staring back. 2 months ago, she'd been a college student with a part-time job and student loans. Now she was an accomplice to whatever Damian was about to do to Victor Karzin. The question was, could she live with it? Elena thought about her mother, safe in a private facility with round-the-clock medical care. Thought about her father, still hiding from his debts while she paid the price. Thought about every person who'd ever looked at her with pity and assumed she was weak. Then she thought about Victor's face when she'd refused to betray Damian. The surprise, the grudging respect. She could live with it. In fact, she was starting to embrace it. When Damian returned that afternoon, covered in dust and exhaustion but alive, Elena was waiting in his office with a bottle of expensive whiskey and 2 glasses. "It's done," he said, accepting the drink she poured him. "Victor's finished. The council will meet next week to discuss redistributing his territories. He'll be lucky if they let him live. And if they don't? Then he dies." Damian drained his glass. "Does that bother you?" Elena considered the question honestly. "It should, but it doesn't. Does that make me a monster?" "It makes you a survivor." He poured himself another drink. "You did well today, Elena. Better than well. You found intelligence, maintained your cover, and gave me everything I needed to end this. You're not the woman who walked down that aisle 2 months ago." "No," Elena agreed. "I'm not." "Does that frighten you?" She met his eyes. "Terrify me, but I'm doing it anyway." Something that might have been pride flickered across Damian's face, or maybe satisfaction. It was hard to tell. "Good," he said, "because things are about to get complicated. Victor isn't going to go quietly. He has allies, resources, and when cornered, dangerous men do desperate things. I need you prepared for whatever comes next." "I am prepared. Are you?" Damian moved closer. "Because what comes next isn't training exercises or tactical theory. It's real, brutal. You might have to watch people die. You might have to make choices that haunt you for the rest of your life. Can you handle that?" Elena thought about the files she'd found, the information she'd given him, the destruction she'd helped orchestrate. "I already have," she said quietly. Damian's hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. "Then God help us both." He kissed her then, not like at the wedding ceremony, not clinical or controlled. This was raw and desperate and real, tasting like whiskey and violence and something neither of them wanted to name. When they broke apart, Elena's heart was hammering, her breathing uneven. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "Surviving," Damian said. "Together." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even affection. It was just truth, stripped down to its bare essentials. They were 2 damaged people trapped in a brutal world, and they'd chosen to stand together rather than fall apart separately. It would have to be enough. That night, Elena lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. In 48 hours, she'd been kidnapped, had volunteered herself as a hostage, had found intelligence that would destroy a criminal empire, and had kissed Damian Vesper like she meant it, like she wanted it. The terrifying thing was, she had. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You made a powerful enemy today, Mrs. Vesper. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. V." Elena stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it and turned off her phone. Let Victor threaten. Let him plot. Let him rage against his impending destruction. She wasn't afraid anymore. Because Elena Vesper, had learned the most important lesson of all. In a world built on fear and violence, The only way to survive was to become the thing others feared, and she was well on her way. Outside her window, Chicago glowed in the darkness, a city of millions living their normal lives, while just above them, in a penthouse fortress, a woman who'd been sold to settle a debt was transforming into something dangerous, something powerful, something unstoppable. The war with Victor was just beginning, but Elena was ready, and when it was over, the city would know her name not as Damian Vesper's wife, but as a force to be feared in her own right. The point of no return had been crossed. There was no going back now. Hanba. The council meeting happened on a Tuesday. Elena wasn't supposed to be there. Damian had made that clear 3 times during breakfast, his voice carrying that edge of absolute authority that meant the discussion was over before it started. But Elena had learned something in the past 2 months. Authority only worked if people obeyed it, and she'd stopped being obedient weeks ago. She arrived at the downtown office building 30 minutes before the meeting, dressed in a charcoal suit that Anna had selected. Professional, severe, the kind of outfit that said she belonged in rooms where powerful men made decisions about life and death. Roman had tried to stop her at the penthouse elevator, his massive frame blocking her path. He said, "No, Mrs. Vesper." He says a lot of things. Elena met his eyes without flinching. "Are you going to physically restrain me, Roman? Because that's the only way I'm not getting in that car." Roman's jaw worked. Then he stepped aside. He's going to be furious. Let him. The building was owned by one of Damian's shell corporations, all marble and glass, and the kind of anonymous wealth that didn't draw attention. Security was invisible but omnipresent. Cameras in every corner, metal detectors disguised as art installations, guards dressed like office workers. Elena recognized 3 of Damian's men positioned throughout the lobby. The conference room was on the 20th floor. Elena rode the elevator alone, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was a test, not of Damian's patience, but of her own transformation. Could she walk into a room full of predators and hold her ground? Or would she crumble back into the frightened girl who'd been sold to settle a debt? The elevator doors opened. Damian stood in the hallway, arms crossed, his expression absolutely glacial. "I told you to stay home," he said quietly, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. "And I chose not to listen." Elena stepped out of the elevator, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. "I found Victor's files. I gave you the intelligence that's ending this war. I earned the right to see how it finishes. You earn nothing except my protection, which you're jeopardizing by being here. Then kick me out. Make a scene. Show everyone in that room that you can't control your own wife." Elena moved closer, dropping her voice. "Or let me in, let me observe, and maintain the illusion that we're a united front. Your choice." Damian's eyes narrowed, something dangerous flickering behind the gray. For a moment, Elena thought he might actually drag her back to the elevator. Then his expression shifted, became calculating. "You don't speak," he said. "You don't react. You sit. You observe. And if things get violent, you get behind me and you stay there. Understood?" "Understood." He turned and walked toward the conference room. Elena followed, her pulse racing, adrenaline singing through her veins. She'd won. Again. Each small victory felt like cracking open a door that had been locked her entire life. The conference room was large enough to host a corporate board meeting, which is exactly what it was designed to look like. Long table, leather chairs, massive windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. But the men seated around that table weren't executives. They were predators wearing expensive suits. Elena recognized some of them from her training sessions with Roman, Marcus Chen, who controlled the city's shipping ports, David Kozlov, who ran security for half the politicians in Illinois, James Sullivan, whose consulting firm was really a front for money laundering on an industrial scale. And at the far end of the table, looking significantly worse than he had at the gala, sat Victor Karzin. Bruises mottled his face. One eye was swollen nearly shut. His hands resting on the table were wrapped in bandages. Damian's message had been delivered personally, apparently. The room went silent when Elena entered. Every eye turned toward her, assessing, calculating, judging. She felt their attention like a physical weight, but she kept her spine straight and her expression neutral. Roman had taught her that predators attacked weakness. Never show them fear. Damian pulled out a chair, not the one beside him, but the one directly behind him. A strategic position, Visible but protected, present but subordinate. Elena sat without comment. Gentlemen, Damian said, his voice cutting through the tension, I apologize for the delay. Let's begin. Marcus Chen leaned forward, his fingers steepled. Before we start, Damian, I think we all want to know why your wife is here. This is council business. My wife found the intelligence that exposed Victor's theft, Damian said calmly. She has a right to witness the consequences. She has no rights here, Victor spat, his voice thick with pain and rage. She's property, a pawn. Don't dress it up as something more. Elena's hands clenched in her lap, but she kept her face blank. Damian didn't even glance back at her. Victor, David Kozlov said tiredly, you're not exactly in a position to make demands. You stole from Damian. You kidnapped his wife's mother. You started a war you couldn't finish. The question isn't whether Elena belongs here. The question is whether you do. I didn't start anything. Victor slammed his bandaged hand on the table and immediately regretted it, his face contorting with pain. Damian's been moving against my territories for months. The shipment was just payback for the dock workers he poached in September. Dock workers you weren't paying, Damian countered. They came to me because I offered better terms. That's not an act of war. That's business. Everything is business until someone loses money. Then it's war. Victor's one good eye fixed on Elena with pure hatred. And now you bring your little whore to watch me burn? Is that it? You want her to see what happens to men who cross Damian Vesper? The word hit Elena like a slap. She felt Damian tense, felt the shift in the room as every man present recognized the insult for what it was. A deliberate provocation designed to make Damian lose control. Careful, Victor. Damian's voice was soft, deadly. You've already dug your grave. Don't make it deeper. Or what? You'll kill me? We both know you can't, not without council approval. That's the rule. That's the only thing keeping both of us alive right now. James Sullivan cleared his throat. Actually, that's why we're here. To vote. Victor, you violated the peace accords. You stole product, kidnapped a civilian, and attempted to use Damian's wife as leverage. Those are all capital offenses under our agreement. She's not a civilian, Victor was shouting now, desperation bleeding through the anger. She's Damian's wife. That makes her part of his organization. Fair game. Except she's not part of his organization, Marcus said. She's a hostage from a debt settlement. That's documented. That makes her a civilian under our definitions, which means you broke the rules. Victor's face went pale. He looked around the table, seeing his death sentence in their expressions. You're going to kill me over this? Over her? We're going to kill you over a pattern, David said. This isn't your first violation, Victor. It's just the first one we can prove beyond doubt. The dock workers, the protection racket in Chinatown, the weapons shipment to Milwaukee that violated our territory agreements. You've been pushing boundaries for 2 years. This is just the excuse we needed. Elena watched Victor process this, watched him realize he'd been set up, not just by Damian, but by the entire council. They'd been waiting for him to make a mistake big enough to justify removing him. She'd just been the bait that made him bite. I want to call a vote, Damian said. All in favor of removing Victor Karzin from this council and redistributing his territories among the remaining members? Marcus raised his hand. Then David, then James. One by one, every man at that table voted for Victor's destruction. Except one. Thomas Morrison, a quiet man in his 60s who controlled the southern suburbs, kept his hands folded on the table. I abstain. The room went very still. Thomas, Damian said carefully, this is a unanimous council. We don't abstain. Then I vote no. Thomas's voice was steady, unapologetic. Victor's an idiot and a liability. But the precedent we're setting here is dangerous. If we can remove a council member for pushing boundaries, for testing the limits of our agreements, then we're all at risk. Today it's Victor. Tomorrow it could be any of us. Victor kidnapped a civilian, Marcus said. That's not testing boundaries, that's breaking them. Is it? Or is it a gray area we're choosing to interpret one way because it's convenient? Thomas looked around the table. Think about it. Elena Vesper was acquired through a debt settlement. That makes her Damian's property under our rules, whether we like the terminology or not, which means Victor's action could be argued as a move against Damian's assets, not against a civilian. Elena felt something cold slide down her spine. Thomas was technically right. The way Damian had acquired her, through her father's debt, made her property under their system. An asset, not a person. That's a stretch, David said, but he sounded uncertain. Is it, Damian, you've called her mine in at least 3 council communications? You've assigned her monetary value in your asset reports. You can't have it both ways. Either she's property and Victor's action was legitimate retaliation, or she's a civilian and your entire acquisition of her was a violation of our rules against human trafficking. The silence that followed was deafening. Damian's hands, resting on the table, clenched into fists. Thomas, what are you doing? Protecting the integrity of our system. Thomas's expression didn't change. If we start making exceptions, blurring lines to justify removing people who've become inconvenient, then this council means nothing. We're just a group of thugs waiting to stab each other in the back. So you'd let Victor live, Damian said slowly, to make a philosophical point. I'd prevent a dangerous precedent from being set, yes. Victor was staring at Thomas like he'd just witnessed a miracle, which, in a way, he had. One dissenting vote meant the removal wasn't unanimous, and without unanimity, the council couldn't act. Marcus swore quietly. This is insane. Thomas, Victor tried to start a war, c'est pour ça, and Damian escalated it, Thomas interrupted. He burned 3 warehouses, stole back his product plus interest, sent Victor to the hospital. I'd say the accounts are balanced. Let's call this even and move on before someone does something we all regret. Elena watched Damian's face, saw the calculations happening behind his eyes. He was trapped. Thomas had found the one legal loophole that saved Victor's life, and there was nothing Damian could do about it without breaking the council's fundamental rules, unless he was willing to start a war, a real one, against the entire council. I want a recess, Damian said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. 20 minutes. Agreed, Marcus said quickly. The men stood, filing out of the conference room in tense silence. Victor moved slowly, his injuries making every step painful, but there was triumph in his eyes. He'd survived. Against all odds, he'd survived. When the room was empty except for Damian and Elena, he finally turned to face her. Get out, he said. Damian, get out. Each word was clipped, precise, absolutely final. Go to the car. Wait for me there. Don't argue. Don't question. Just go. Elena stood, her legs unsteady. She'd seen Damian angry before, but this was different. This was rage so profound it had frozen into something cold and dangerous. She walked to the door, then paused. What are you going to do? What I should have done 2 weeks ago. Damian's eyes met hers, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. I'm going to kill Victor Karzin, council approval or not. That'll start a war. Then there'll be a war. Get out, Elena. She left. But instead of going to the car, she positioned herself in an empty office across the hall where she could watch through the conference room's glass walls. If Damian was about to destroy everything, she needed to see it happen. 20 minutes passed. The council members filed back in. Victor looked smug now, confident in his unexpected reprieve. Thomas Morrison's face was expressionless. Damian was the last to enter. He closed the door behind him with careful precision, and Elena saw him lock it. The click was audible even through the glass. That's when she knew something was very wrong. Gentlemen, Damian said, his voice carrying through the room, I've given Thomas's argument considerable thought during our recess, and I've come to a conclusion. And? Marcus prompted. He's right. The council's integrity matters more than my personal vendetta against Victor. I withdraw my motion for removal. Victor's triumph was visible. He actually smiled, the expression grotesque on his damaged face. However, Damian continued, and his tone made everyone freeze, I have a different proposal. One that doesn't require unanimity. A simple majority vote will suffice. Thomas leaned forward, suspicion creeping into his expression. What kind of proposal? I propose that we amend our rules regarding asset acquisition, specifically that we outlaw debt-based transfers of human beings. Make it explicitly illegal under our codes. Anyone who currently owns a person through such means has 30 days to release them or face removal from the council. Elena's breath caught. He was talking about her, about setting her free, But why? That's a significant change, David said slowly. It would affect several members. Marcus has 2 debt acquisitions. James has 1. And you have Elena. Exactly. Damian's smile was cold. Which is why I'm proposing it. I'm willing to release Elena if it means we close this loophole permanently. No more gray areas, no more debating whether someone is property or civilian. Clean rules, clear consequences. And if we pass this amendment, Thomas said, understanding dawning in his eyes, then Elena is definitively a civilian, which means Victor's kidnapping becomes an unambiguous violation. Which means, Damian finished, we can call another vote on Victor's removal, one that will be unanimous this time. The trap closed. Elena saw it happen in real time, saw the council members realize what Damian had done. He'd found a way to force Thomas's hand. Either Thomas voted for the amendment and condemned Victor, or he voted against it and admitted he'd only defended Victor to protect the gray areas that benefited other council members. That's brilliant, Marcus said quietly. Ruthless, but brilliant. I vote yes, David said immediately. The amendment passes. Debt acquisitions are illegal as of now. Seconded, James added. All eyes turned to Thomas. The older man's face was unreadable, but Elena saw his hands clench on the table. He'd been outmaneuvered, and he knew it. I vote yes, he said finally. The amendment passes. Victor surged to his feet, his chair clattering backward. This is a setup. You can't just change the rules to We just did, Damian said. Sit down, Victor. We're not finished. Like hell we're not. Victor's hand moved toward his jacket, and Elena's heart stopped. He was going for a weapon, in a locked room, surrounded by men who wanted him dead. It happened fast. Victor's gun cleared his jacket. Damian moved like water, faster than Elena thought possible, closing the distance between them in 3 strides. His hand caught Victor's wrist, twisting, and the gun clattered to the floor. Then Damian's other hand was around Victor's throat, slamming him back against the wall hard enough to crack the drywall. You pulled a weapon in a council meeting, Damian said, his voice eerily calm. That's an automatic death sentence. No vote required. Victor clawed at Damian's hand, his face turning purple, his feet kicking uselessly. The other council members watched without intervening. Some looked disturbed. Others looked satisfied. None of them moved to stop it. Elena pressed her hand against the glass, unable to look away. This was what she'd chosen. This was the world she'd agreed to survive in. Men choking the life out of each other in conference rooms while others watched like it was theater. Victor's struggles weakened. His eyes, wide with terror, found Elena through the glass. For a moment their gazes locked, and she saw the plea in his expression. Help me! Save me! Elena didn't move. Victor went limp. Damian held him for 10 more seconds, making absolutely certain, then released him. Victor's body crumpled to the floor like discarded clothing. Roman, Damian said, pulling out his phone. Conference room. We have a cleanup situation. Through the glass, Elena watched Damian straighten his tie, brush off his jacket, and return to his seat like he hadn't just murdered a man with his bare hands. The other council members were talking quietly, already discussing the redistribution of Victor's territories like his corpse wasn't cooling 6 feet away. This was normal for them. Expected. Business. Elena's hands were shaking. She forced them still, forced herself to breathe normally, forced the nausea down. She'd wanted to see how it ended. Well, now she knew. Roman arrived with a team of cleaners. They worked with efficient precision, wrapping Victor's body in plastic, removing the damaged section of wall, erasing all evidence that a man had died in this room. 20 minutes. That's all it took to make a human being disappear. The council meeting resumed. Territories were divided, agreements were reached. Damian got the largest share of Victor's holdings, which was expected since he'd been the one to expose Victor's crimes. The amendment about debt acquisitions was formally documented and signed by all remaining members. And just like that, Elena was free. She should have felt relief. Liberation. Instead, she felt nothing but a creeping sense of wrongness, like something fundamental had shifted in a way she didn't fully understand yet. The meeting adjourned an hour later. The council members filed out, shaking hands, making plans for dinner, acting like they hadn't just witnessed a murder. Thomas Morrison paused when he saw Elena in the empty office across the hall. Mrs. Vesper, he said quietly. Or should I say, Ms. Vale now? I don't know, Elena said honestly. What should you call me? Careful. Thomas glanced toward the conference room where Damian was still gathering his papers. Damian just gave up significant legal protection to set you free. The question is why? Men like him don't make sacrifices without expecting something in return. Maybe he actually cares about me. Thomas's laugh was bitter. Maybe. Or maybe he realized that keeping you as property made you a liability. But setting you free makes you something more valuable, a willing participant. No one can use you against him now because you're choosing to be here. That's not freedom, Ms. Vale. That's a more sophisticated cage. He walked away before Elena could respond. She stood there in the empty office, Thomas's words echoing in her head, watching Damian through the glass. He looked up, met her eyes, and gestured for her to join him. Elena crossed the hall on legs that felt disconnected from her body. The conference room smelled like industrial cleaner and something coppery underneath. Victor's blood, probably, soaked into the carpet despite the cleaner's best efforts. You watched, Damian said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now. Elena's voice came out hollow. You killed him. Just squeezed his throat until he stopped breathing, and then you sat back down and divided up his territories like you'd just closed a business deal. That's what it was, a business deal. Damian moved closer, and Elena fought the urge to retreat. Victor was a problem. I solved it. That's what I do. By murdering people in conference rooms. By protecting what's mine. He kidnapped your mother. He threatened you. He tried to use you as leverage against me. Did you expect me to let that go? I expected... Elena stopped, realizing she didn't know what she'd expected. You freed me. The amendment. That was real? That was real. As of 20 minutes ago, you're legally not my property anymore. You can leave. Right now. Walk out of this building, and I won't stop you. I'll even give you money, a new identity, protection until you're settled somewhere far away from Chicago. Elena stared at him. You're serious. Completely. You've earned it. You found Victor's files. You gave me the intelligence I needed. You've proven yourself more capable than I ever expected. If you want out, now's your chance. It was the offer she'd been dreaming about for 2 months. Freedom, escape. A chance to go back to being Elena Vale, college student, normal person, someone who didn't watch men die in conference rooms. So why did the thought of leaving make her chest tight with something that felt like panic? And if I stay? She heard herself ask. Damian's expression shifted, became predatory. Then you stay because you choose to. Not as my property, not as my hostage, as my partner. You help me run this organization. You sit in on council meetings, you make decisions, real power, Elena. The kind you've been circling around for weeks, but you have to choose it, willingly, knowingly, understanding exactly what that means. It means becoming like you. It means becoming what you already are. You just haven't admitted it yet. He gestured toward the window. You watched me kill Victor, and you didn't run. You didn't scream. You didn't call the police. You stood there and you watched, and part of you understood why it had to happen. That's not innocence, Elena. That's complicity. The word hung in the air between them like an accusation or an invitation. Elena thought about Thomas's warning, about sophisticated cages, about the difference between being forced into darkness and walking into it with open eyes. I need time, she said, to think, to process. No. Damian's voice was flat. You don't get time. Choose now. Stay or go. Partner or civilian. There's no middle ground anymore. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, but it is simple. Do you want power? Do you want to matter? Do you want to be someone people fear and respect instead of pity? Or do you want to go back to being invisible, to working minimum wage jobs and visiting your sick mother once a week and wondering if you'll ever be more than just another face in the crowd? The questions struck deep because they were the same ones Elena had been asking herself for years. Before Damian, before the wedding, when she was just a college student drowning in student loans and medical bills and her father's debts, watching her life narrow to a small, confined space with no exits. If I stay, she said slowly, what happens to my mother? She stays in the private facility, full care, for life. That doesn't change regardless of your choice. And my father? Something dark flickered across Damian's face. I found him last week. He's in Atlantic City, still gambling, still losing, still running from his debts. Elena's hands clenched. And I could make him disappear permanently, if you want me to. The offer should have horrified her. Instead, she felt a surge of dark satisfaction at the thought of Marcus Vale facing consequences for once in his pathetic life. Or, Damian continued, I could let him keep running, keep losing. Let him destroy himself slowly. That's crueler, honestly. But it's your call. Elena thought about her father, about the years of broken promises and empty apologies, about the night he'd told her she'd been sold to settle his debts, his face showing more relief than guilt, about how he'd disappeared rather than face what he'd done. Let him run, she said finally. Let him spend every day looking over his shoulder, waiting for someone to collect. That's punishment enough. Damian's smile was approving. Good choice. Cold, calculated. You're learning. He paused. So what's it going to be, Elena? Stay or go? Elena looked around the conference room, at the place where Victor had died, at the windows overlooking a city that had no idea what happened in rooms like this, at Damian, offering her a choice that wasn't really a choice at all because they both knew what she'd already become. I need to see my mother first, she said, before I decide. I need to see her and make sure she's really safe. Damian considered this, then nodded. Fair enough. We'll go now. But Elena, his voice dropped, became deadly serious. When you come back from that visit, you decide. No more delays, no more excuses. You're either in or you're out. Understood. They left the building in silence, Roman and his team forming a protective perimeter. The drive to the medical facility took 30 minutes through Chicago traffic. Elena spent it staring out the window, trying to organize her thoughts into something coherent. Her mother was awake when they arrived. The private room was bright and clean, filled with flowers and medical equipment that beeped softly. Margaret Vale looked smaller than Elena remembered, diminished by illness and age, but her eyes were clear when they focused on her daughter. Elena? She breathed. Oh God, Elena, I thought, when those men took me, I thought I'd never see you again. Elena crossed to the bed and took her mother's hand. The skin was paper thin, the bones fragile beneath. I'm here, Mom. I'm okay. You're okay. We're both safe now. Because of him? Margaret's eyes shifted to Damian, who stood near the door, maintaining a respectful distance. Because of your husband? The word felt strange. Husband, like it was describing someone else's life. Because of a lot of things, Elena said carefully. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Anything, sweetheart. If I could leave, if I could walk away from Damian, from this whole situation, and start over somewhere else, would you want me to? Margaret's expression crumpled. Of course I would. Elena, you were sold like cattle because your father is a coward. You deserve better than this. Better than being forced into a marriage you never wanted. Better than living with a man who... She glanced at Damian again, lowering her voice. Who does terrible things. And if I told you, I'm not sure I want to leave anymore? The monitors beeped faster as Margaret's heart rate increased. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe I'm not the same person I was 2 months ago. Maybe I've changed. Maybe I've found something here that I never had before. Elena struggled to find the right words. Purpose, I guess. Power. The ability to actually affect things instead of just surviving them. Oh, Elena. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. That's not power. That's Stockholm Syndrome. That's trauma bonding. He's manipulated you into thinking... He hasn't manipulated me into anything, Elena interrupted, surprised by the sharpness in her own voice. I've had choices. Real ones. And I've made them with full knowledge of the consequences. I'm not a victim anymore, Mom. I'm a participant. Listen to yourself. You're talking like one of them. Like a criminal. Maybe I am one of them now. The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples that wouldn't stop. Margaret stared at her daughter like she was looking at a stranger. Your father did this, Margaret whispered. He destroyed you, destroyed us both. Dad started it, but I'm the one who chose how to respond. Elena stood, releasing her mother's hand. I wanted to see you. to make sure you were safe and being cared for. You are. You will be. For the rest of your life, you'll have everything you need. That's not changing regardless of what I decide. Decide about what? Whether I stay with Damian as his partner, not his hostage, his equal. Margaret's face went pale. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Elena, please, think about what you're saying. Think about what you'll become. I have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else for weeks. Elena leaned down, kissed her mother's forehead gently. I love you, Mom. That's not changing either. But I'm not the little girl you raised anymore. I can't be. The world doesn't let people like us stay innocent. She walked toward the door. Damian stepped aside to let her pass, his expression unreadable. Elena, Margaret's voice cracked with desperation. If you do this, if you choose this life, you can never go back. You'll have blood on your hands. You'll be responsible for terrible things. Elena paused at the threshold, her hand on the doorframe. I already am, Mom. I've already got blood on my hands. Victor's blood. And the blood of everyone who'll die because of the information I gave Damian. The only question is whether I own that or spend the rest of my life pretending it didn't happen. She left before her mother could respond. The hallway was cold and sterile, smelling of disinfectant and despair. Damian fell into step beside her as they walked toward the elevators. That was harder than I expected, Elena said quietly. The truth usually is. They rode down in silence. Roman was waiting in the lobby with the car. Elena slid into the back seat, her mind churning through everything that had just happened. Her mother's tears, the accusation of Stockholm Syndrome, the look of horror when Elena admitted she might stay. The drive back to the penthouse took 45 minutes. Rush hour traffic, the city clogged with normal people heading home to normal lives. Elena watched them through the tinted windows, couples holding hands, parents with children, office workers talking on phones. An entire world that existed parallel to hers, but might as well have been on a different planet. When they reached the penthouse, Anna had dinner waiting. Roasted chicken and vegetables, fresh bread, wine that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Elena sat at the table across from Damian, pushing food around her plate without eating. You're quiet, Damian observed. I'm thinking. About your mother's accusations? Among other things, Elena set down her fork. Was she right? Have you manipulated me? Made me think I have choices when really you've been controlling everything from the beginning? Damian took a sip of wine, considering the question. Would it matter if I had? Of course it would matter. Why? If you're happy with the results, if you found purpose and power like you told your mother, does it matter how you got there? Intent matters. Consent matters. Does it? Damian leaned forward. Elena, you were sold to me to settle a debt. There was no consent, no choice, just a transaction. But from that starting point, you've had hundreds of small choices. To cooperate or resist, to learn or refuse, to find Victor's files or pretend you never saw them, to stay in that car at the warehouse or get out. Every single one of those choices was yours. I didn't make them for you. You created the circumstances that forced them. Life created those circumstances. Your father's gambling, your mother's illness, the fact that you were born poor in a world that punishes poverty. I just happened to be the one who offered you a way out. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. I'm sitting here having a philosophical debate about whether my transformation into a criminal's accomplice was consensual. Do you hear how crazy that sounds? I hear how honest it sounds. Damian stood as well. Most people never admit what they really want. They hide behind morality and social expectations and fear. You're at least facing it directly. And what do I really want, according to you? Power. Respect. The ability to affect your own destiny instead of being a victim of other people's choices. You want to matter, Elena, and in my world you do. You're not invisible anymore. You're not helpless. You're dangerous, and part of you loves that. The accusation hit home because it was true. Elena had felt it during the warehouse rescue, during the council meeting, during her conversation with her mother. A dark thrill at being someone people feared, someone capable of terrible things. I'm not a good person anymore, she said quietly. Good and bad are irrelevant. You're an effective person. That's what matters. To you. To you too. whether you admit it or not. Damian moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. Make your choice, Elena. I'm done waiting. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, saw the man who'd bought her, trapped her, trained her, freed her. Who'd killed Victor Karzin with his bare hands and then calmly divided up the spoils? Who'd given her mother lifetime care and offered to murder her father? Who'd shown her the darkest parts of human nature and then offered her a place within it? If I stay, she said slowly, I need real power. Not the illusion of it. Not permission to sit in on meetings and observe. Real authority to make decisions. Done. You'll have full access to the organization's operations, veto power on major decisions, a seat at the council table when we replace Victor's position. And if we disagree? If I think you're making a mistake? Then we argue about it, like partners, not like owner and property. And if we can't reach agreement? Damian's smile was sharp. Then we'll find out which one of us is more ruthless. That's how partnerships work in my world. Mutual benefit until it isn't, then whoever's stronger wins. That's not reassuring. It's honest, which is more than most marriages can claim. Elena laughed despite herself, a brittle sound that held more exhaustion than humor. This is the most dysfunctional relationship I've ever heard of. And yet you're still standing here instead of running. He was right. She was still here. Still choosing this. Still walking deeper into the darkness instead of toward the light. I have one more condition, Elena said. Name it. If I do this, if I become your partner, then you tell me everything. No more secrets, no more surprises, no more finding out information after the fact. If we're equals, then I get the truth, all of it. Damian's expression shifted, became guarded. Some truths are dangerous to know. Then I'll be in danger. That's my choice to make. They stared at each other across the dining room, two damaged people negotiating the terms of their alliance, or their destruction. It was hard to tell which. Fine, Damian said finally. Full disclosure, starting now. Starting now. Then I should tell you that the council meeting was a setup from the beginning, not just for Victor, for you. Elena's blood ran cold. What? Thomas Morrison didn't object to Victor's removal out of principle. He objected because I paid him to. I needed you to see the process, to understand how the game works, to watch me kill Victor and see how you'd react. The betrayal was like a physical blow. Elena stepped backward, her hand finding the edge of the table for support. You staged it. The vote? The debate about whether I was property or civilian? Not staged. The outcome was engineered, but the stakes were real. Thomas could have actually blocked the vote if he'd wanted to. Victor's death was always going to happen. But how it happened, and whether you stayed to watch, that was the real test. A test? Elena's voice shook with fury. You turned a man's murder into a test for me? I turned it into a choice. Stay and accept this world, or run and never look back. You stayed. That told me everything I needed to know. You manipulative son of a... Elena grabbed the nearest object, a wine glass, and hurled it at Damian's head. He ducked, and it shattered against the wall behind him. Feel better? He asked calmly. No! Elena was shaking now, rage and betrayal warring with the horrible realization that even knowing all this, she still wasn't leaving. You lied to me. You set me up. You've been playing me like a chess piece since the beginning. Yes, because that's what I do. That's what this world requires. And if you're going to survive as my partner, you need to be able to do it too. Manipulation, deception, seeing 3 moves ahead of everyone else. Damian's voice was absolutely steady. You wanted the truth? Here it is. I've been testing you since the day we met. Every challenge, every decision, every moment of freedom I gave you was carefully calculated to push you in a specific direction. And it worked. You're exactly where I need you to be. Where's that? Committed. All in. Too deep to go back. He gestured at the broken glass on the floor. You just threw a weapon at my head instead of walking out the door. That's not the action of someone who still thinks she has a choice. That's the action of someone who's already made her decision and is angry about it. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to prove him wrong, but she couldn't, because he was right. She was furious at being manipulated, but she wasn't leaving. The anger came from feeling tricked, not from wanting escape. When had that changed? When had the cage become home? I hate you, she said quietly. No, you don't. You hate that I'm right. There's a difference. You're a monster, Begica. So are you. You just haven't fully accepted it yet. Damian moved closer, glass crunching under his shoes. But you will, because the alternative is going back to being powerless, and you've tasted too much power to settle for that now. Stop. Elena held up a hand. Just stop. I need... Her voice broke. I need a minute to think, to breathe, to figure out if I'm making the worst mistake of my life. You have 1 minute, then I need an answer. Elena turned away, her mind racing. Everything she'd thought she understood had been a lie. Or not a lie exactly, but a carefully constructed scenario designed to make her choose exactly what Damian wanted her to choose. Even her freedom, the amendment that supposedly freed her, had probably been planned from the beginning. She was trapped. She'd always been trapped. The only variable was whether she fought against it or accepted it. And the horrifying truth was, part of her didn't want to fight anymore. Time's up, Damian said. Choose. Elena turned back to face him, and in that moment she made a decision that would define everything that came after. Not because she was forced, not because she had no other options, but because some fundamental part of her had recognized that she'd already crossed too many lines to go back. I stay, she said. I become your partner. I help you run this organization. I attend council meetings and make decisions and do terrible things to terrible people. Not because I have to, because I choose to. Why? The question caught her off guard. What? Why are you choosing this? I need to hear you say it out loud. I need you to admit it to yourself. Elena took a deep breath, released it slowly, felt the last fragments of who she used to be crumble away. Because I like it, she said, and the admission was like cutting a cord. I like having power. I like being feared. I like watching men like Victor realize they underestimated me. I like being someone who matters instead of someone who's invisible, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. Damian's smile was genuine this time, proud even. There it is, the truth. Finally. So what now? Now we get to work. Victor's territories need to be absorbed. His operations need to be dismantled or integrated. And his daughter... Damian paused, something calculating entering his expression. Needs to be handled. His daughter? Sienna Karzin, 26, smart, educated, completely unprepared to inherit her father's empire, but she'll try anyway. The council will eat her alive unless someone intervenes. Elena understood immediately. You want me to recruit her? I want you to make her an offer. Join our organization, swear loyalty to me, and she keeps some of her father's legitimate businesses. Refuse, and she loses everything. That's cruel. That's practical. She's an asset or a liability. There's no third option. Elena thought about Sienna Karzin, about how it had felt to be thrust into a world she didn't understand, surrounded by predators. How terrifying and disorienting and awful it had been. I'll talk to her, Elena said, but I do it my way. Not with threats, with truth. She deserves to know exactly what she's choosing. Fair enough, as long as she chooses correctly. And if she doesn't, Damian's expression went cold. Then you make her disappear, quietly, efficiently, like I taught you. The order hung in the air between them. A test. The final one, maybe. Could Elena not just accept violence, but commit it herself? I understand, Elena heard herself say. And she did. That was the most terrifying part. She understood exactly what Damian was asking, and she was willing to do it. The transformation was complete. Elena Vale, college student, caring daughter, good person, was gone. In her place stood Elena Vesper, partner to a crime lord, future member of a criminal council, someone capable of murder in the name of practical necessity. When do I meet with Sienna? Elena asked, her voice steady. Tomorrow. I'll arrange it. But tonight, Damian gestured toward his office, you and I need to review Victor's files, everything you memorized from the warehouse. I want a complete accounting of his operations before we start dismantling them. They worked until 3 a.m., going through financial records and shipping manifests and lists of associates that would need to be contacted, recruited, or eliminated. Elena's mind cataloged everything with frightening efficiency. her training with Roman having sharpened her memory and analytical skills. At some point, Anna brought coffee. Elena barely noticed, too focused on the work, on learning the structure of Victor's empire so she could help tear it down and rebuild it under Damian's control. When they finally finished, the sky outside was starting to lighten with pre-dawn gray. Damian stood and stretched, vertebrae cracking. "You did well tonight," he said. "Better than I expected." High praise.
"It is." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Elena, for what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed." "Are you?" "Yes. You make me better, sharper. You see things I miss, question decisions I take for granted. That's valuable in ways you don't fully understand yet. And if I become a liability instead of an asset, then I'll handle it. Same way I handled Victor, same way I handle all my problems." His eyes met hers. "But I don't think that's going to happen. You're too smart, too adaptable, too willing to do what's necessary." He left before Elena could respond. She sat alone in Damian's office as dawn broke over Chicago, staring at files filled with names and numbers and crimes. Somewhere in this city, Sienna Carzin was waking up to the news that her father was dead. Somewhere else, Elena's mother was crying over the daughter she'd lost to darkness. And somewhere in Atlantic City, Marcus Vale was probably at a poker table, completely unaware that his daughter had become something more terrifying than any debt he'd ever owed. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your promotion, Mrs. Vesper. Victor's death leaves a power vacuum. Interested parties are watching to see how you fill it. Choose wisely. A friend." Elena stared at the message, then deleted it. Anonymous threats were meaningless. She'd faced worse. She'd become worse. The sun climbed higher, painting the windows gold. A new day, a new life, a new Elena. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city spread out below like a game board. Somewhere down there were people to recruit, enemies to destroy, territories to claim. The work of building an empire, one calculated decision at a time. And for the first time in her life, Elena felt completely, terrifyingly certain of her place in the world. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, as a predator. The question wasn't whether she could live with what she'd become. The question was whether the world could survive it. The meeting with Sienna Carzin was scheduled for 2 p.m. at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Lincoln Park that Damian's people had swept 3 times for surveillance devices and weapons. Elena arrived 15 minutes early, Roman shadowing her from a table near the entrance, 2 more of Damian's men positioned outside. Sienna walked in exactly on time. She was smaller than Elena expected, maybe 5'4" in heels, with her father's dark hair but softer features. Pretty in a way that suggested she'd never had to fight for anything in her life. Her clothes were expensive but understated. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, jewelry that cost more than most people's cars, but worn like it was nothing. She spotted Elena immediately and crossed the coffee shop with her chin high, defiant. Up close, Elena could see the signs of grief, red-rimmed eyes, makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion, hands that trembled slightly as she pulled out a chair. "Mrs. Vesper," Sienna said, her voice cold. "Or should I call you the woman who got my father killed? Call me Elena. And I didn't get your father killed. He did that himself when he kidnapped my mother." "Your mother?" Sienna's laugh was bitter. "My father is dead because of your mother. Do you understand how insane that is? Your father is dead because he started a war he couldn't finish. My mother was just the weapon he chose. He could have picked anything. He picked wrong." Sienna's jaw clenched, her fingers gripping the edge of the table hard enough that her knuckles went white. "They wouldn't even let me see his body. They said it was too dangerous, that Damian's people might target me at the funeral home. So I don't even get to say goodbye. I just get a phone call telling me he's gone, and a lawyer explaining that everything he owned is being seized by the council." "Not everything," Elena said quietly. "That's why I'm here." Sienna's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Damian is willing to let you keep some of your father's legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the real estate holdings, the car dealerships, everything legal and above board. You'll have enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. More than comfortably. In exchange for what? Loyalty. You swear allegiance to Damian's organization. You provide information when asked. You attend events when required.
You become part of his network. So I become his property, like you. The words were meant to sting, but Elena felt nothing except a cold recognition of truth. Not property, an asset. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a woman who was bought and paid for. My father told me about your situation, how your gambling addict father sold you to settle his debts. You really think you have any power in Damian's world? You're a trophy, a pretty face he can parade around to prove he's civilized. Elena smiled, and it was the smile Damian had taught her, the one that didn't reach her eyes, that promised violence beneath the surface. Your father underestimated me too. Look how that worked out for him. Sienna flinched like she'd been slapped. You bitch? Probably. But I'm a bitch with power, and you're a dead crime lord's daughter with nothing but grief and rapidly dwindling options. So let's be practical. You take Damian's offer, or you walk out of here with nothing. Those are your choices. I could go to the police, tell them everything, about Damian, about the council, about all of you. You could. You'd be dead within 24 hours. The council has cops, judges, prosecutors all over this city. You wouldn't make it to a witness stand. You'd have an accident, or get mugged, or just disappear. And then Damian would take everything anyway, including the legitimate businesses I'm offering you now. Sienna's breathing was coming faster, her composure cracking. This is insane. This whole thing is insane. I didn't ask for any of this. I was supposed to get married next month, to Richard Morrison. We were going to move to Boston, start over somewhere clean, and now... Her voice broke. Now he won't even return my calls. His father told him to cut contact, to pretend he never knew me. Elena felt an unexpected stab of sympathy. She remembered that feeling, the moment when everything you thought your life would be just evaporated, replaced by a reality so brutal you couldn't process it. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. Truly, you didn't deserve this. But here we are. And you have to make a choice based on the world as it is, not as you wish it was. Some choice. Join the people who killed my father or lose everything. Yes, that's the choice. Welcome to our world. Sienna was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, there were tears on her cheeks, but her voice was steady. If I agree, if I swear loyalty to Damian, do I have to do what you do? Attend meetings? Watch people die? Become... She gestured vaguely at Elena. Whatever you've become? No. You just have to be available when called. Provide information when asked. Keep your mouth shut about what you see and hear. That's it. You can live a relatively normal life as long as you don't interfere with Damian's operations. And if I refuse? Elena held her gaze. Then I walk out of here. And within a week, everything your father built, legal or otherwise, gets absorbed into Damian's empire. You'll have nothing, no money, no protection, no future except whatever you can scrape together on your own. You'd really do that? Take everything from someone who just lost their father? I'd do worse if Damian asked me to. The truth came out flat, matter of fact. I'm not here to be your friend, Sienna. I'm here to give you an option that's better than the alternative. Take it or don't. But decide now. Sienna's hands were shaking openly now. She wiped at her tears angrily, smearing mascara across her cheeks. I need time to think, to talk to lawyers. You have 30 seconds. After that, the offer expires. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. 20 seconds. You can't just... 10 seconds. Sienna made a sound between a sob and a scream, her hands fisting in her hair. Fine, I'll do it. I'll swear loyalty or whatever you need. Just don't take everything. Please. Elena pulled a document from her bag and slid it across the table. Sign this. It's a contract outlining the terms. You keep the legitimate businesses. You provide cooperation when requested. You maintain absolute secrecy about Damian's operations. Violation of any term results in immediate forfeiture of all assets and potential criminal charges. Criminal charges for what? For whatever we decide to charge you with. Damian has enough evidence to implicate you in your father's operations if necessary, even if you never participated. That's the insurance policy. Sienna stared at the contract like it was a snake. This is blackmail. This is business. Sign or walk. The pen shook in Sienna's hand as she signed. Her signature was barely legible, the letters jagged with emotion. When she finished, she shoved the document back across the table. I hope you're happy, she said, her voice thick with hatred. I hope you and Damian are very happy together in whatever hell you've built for yourselves.
We're not happy, but we're powerful. And in this world, that matters more. Elena stood, tucking the signed contract back into her bag. Someone will contact you within 48 hours with details about the business transfers. Cooperate fully. If you try to run, if you try to contact the authorities, if you do anything except exactly what you're told, the consequences will be severe. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. Welcome to the organization, Sienna. Try not to fuck it up.
Elena walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Roman fell into step beside her, his expression unreadable. How'd it go? He asked. She signed. She hates me, but she signed. Most people hate us. You get used to it. They drove back to the penthouse in silence. Elena stared out the window, watching the city slide past, thinking about Sienna's tears and broken engagement and shattered future, thinking about how easily she delivered threats that would have horrified her 2 months ago. Damian was waiting in his office when she arrived. He looked up from his computer, reading her expression immediately. She signed? She signed. Elena dropped the contract on his desk. She also called me a bitch and told me she hopes we're happy in hell. Standard response. You handled it well. I gave her 30 seconds to decide. She cried, she signed. I threatened her with criminal charges if she violates the terms. So yes, I'd say I handled it well. Something shifted in Damian's expression. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction. You're getting good at this. At destroying people's lives? Yeah, I'm a natural. At making hard decisions without flinching. That's different. He stood and crossed to the bar, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Elena. To your first successful negotiation. Elena took the glass but didn't drink. It doesn't feel successful. It feels like I just ruined a 26-year-old woman's life. You gave her an option. She could have walked away. With nothing. After losing her father, after her fiancé abandoned her. That's not really a choice.
It's more of a choice than most people get. Damian's voice was matter-of-fact. The world is brutal, Elena. We didn't make it that way. We just learned how to survive in it. By making it more brutal. By being realistic about what it takes to maintain power. He drained his glass. Speaking of which, we have a problem. Elena's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Thomas Morrison sent a message this morning. He wants a private meeting, tonight, just him and me.
That's suspicious. That's a fucking trap. Damian set his glass down with deliberate precision. Thomas voted against Victor's removal. Then he conveniently changed his vote after I introduced the amendment. He's been too quiet since Victor's death, too accepting of the territory redistribution. Men like Thomas don't just roll over. So don't go. Send someone else. One can't. He invoked the council protocols, a direct request for private negotiation between members. If I refuse, it signals fear, weakness. If you go, he might kill you. He might try. Damian's smile was cold. But I don't think that's his play. Thomas is smart. Killing a council member triggers automatic investigation and retaliation. He wouldn't risk it unless he was absolutely certain he could get away with it. Then what does he want? That's what I need to find out. Damian pulled out his phone, checking the time. The meeting is at 8 p.m., Warehouse District, neutral territory. I'm coming with you. No. Damian, no, Elena. This is too dangerous. If Thomas is planning something, I need to know you're safe, not standing beside me making yourself a target. We're partners. You said I'd have full access to operations. That means I go where you go, not to potential ambush sites. His voice was flat, final. You stay here. Roman stays with you. I take Marcus and Alexei. If something goes wrong, if I don't come back by midnight, Roman gets you out of the city. New identity, new life, everything arranged. Elena's chest tightened. You're preparing for your own death. I'm being practical, same as always. He moved closer, and for the first time since she'd met him, Elena saw something that looked like genuine emotion in his eyes. Not love exactly, but something close to it, something that recognized her as more than an asset. If this is a trap, he said quietly, if Thomas has decided to make a move against me, then you being there just gives him another hostage, another piece of leverage. I won't let that happen. So I'm supposed to just sit here and wait, not knowing if you're alive or dead? Yes, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. Because you're smart enough to know that emotional decisions get people killed. His hand came up, cupping her face with unexpected gentleness. I need you thinking clearly, not running into danger because you're worried about me. I'm not worried about you, Elena lied. I'm worried about my investment. If you die, this whole empire falls apart. Damian's laugh was soft. Sure, keep telling yourself that. He left at 7:30, Marcus and Alexei flanking him, all three men armed and armored beneath their suits. Elena watched from the window as they drove away, three black vehicles disappearing into Chicago's evening traffic. Roman positioned himself near the door, his weapon visible now, his attention focused entirely on potential threats. He'll be fine, Roman said, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as Elena. Damian's smart, careful. He survived worse than Thomas Morrison. Elena didn't respond. She paced the penthouse, her mind racing through scenarios. What if it was a trap? What if Thomas had allied with other council members? What if Damian was walking into an execution? 8 p.m. came and went. Elena's phone stayed silent. 8:30. 9. 9:30. At 10 p.m., Elena couldn't take it anymore. I'm going. No. Roman moved to block the elevator. Damian's orders were clear. You stay here. Damian's orders don't account for him being dead in a warehouse somewhere. I'm going, Roman. Move. I can't let you do that. Elena pulled the letter opener from her sleeve, the one she'd taken from Victor's office and kept ever since. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was sharp and she knew how to use it. I said move. Roman stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Damian was right about you. You really don't know when to quit. He stepped aside. Fine, but I'm coming with you. And if we both die, I'm blaming you in the afterlife. They took one car, Roman driving with controlled aggression through city streets. The warehouse district was industrial and abandoned, the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody heard the screams. Elena's pulse hammered as they approached the coordinates Damian had given Roman earlier. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, dark except for a single light in a second-floor window. 3 vehicles were parked outside. Damian's convoy, but no guards. No visible security. This is wrong, Roman said, his hand on his weapon. Where are Marcus and Alexei? They should be outside maintaining perimeter. Elena's stomach churned. Maybe they went inside. Maybe. Or maybe they're dead. They got out of the car carefully, Roman scanning for threats, Elena staying close behind him. The warehouse door was unlocked. Inside, the space was massive and empty, their footsteps echoing on concrete. A staircase led to the second floor. The light Elena had seen from outside spilled down from above, casting long shadows. Roman went first, his weapon raised, Elena following with her ridiculous letter opener that suddenly felt absurd against whatever might be waiting up there. The second floor was a single large room, probably an old office space. And in the center of that space stood Damian, Thomas Morrison, and 4 other men Elena didn't recognize. Damian's face when he saw her went absolutely white with fury. What the fuck are you doing here, he demanded. Saving your stupid ass, apparently. Elena stepped fully into the room, her eyes sweeping the scene. Damian wasn't restrained, wasn't injured, just standing there looking angry. Which meant this wasn't an ambush, which meant it was something worse. Elena, Thomas said, and his smile was knowing, satisfied. How perfect. I was just telling Damian that his greatest weakness has always been his attachments, and here you are, proving my point. What's going on? Elena looked between them. Damian? Thomas has a proposal, Damian said, his voice tight. One that involves you directly, which is why I didn't want you here. What kind of proposal? Thomas gestured to the 4 men standing with him. These gentlemen represent organizations in Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, and Indianapolis. They're interested in expanding their operations into Chicago, specifically into the territories Victor used to control. That's council business, Elena said. Those territories were already redistributed. By a council that's become unstable, Thomas interrupted. Victor's death created a power vacuum. Damian's rapid consolidation of territory has made the other members nervous. They're concerned he's becoming too powerful, too aggressive. So this is a coup, Damian said flatly. You're trying to remove me from the council. Not remove, rebalance. These organizations want a seat at the table, a piece of Chicago's action, and they're willing to pay handsomely for it. The question is whether you're willing to negotiate or whether we need to force the issue. Force how? Thomas's smile widened. By taking something you value, something that would make you reconsider your position. Elena understood a half second before Damian moved. She saw his hand go for his weapon, saw Roman shift to cover her, saw Thomas's men draw their guns faster. Don't, Thomas said calmly, and suddenly there were 4 pistols pointed at Damian. Your bodyguards downstairs are already neutralized, not dead, just unconscious. I'm not trying to start a war, Damian. I'm trying to prevent one. But I need leverage to make you listen. Let her go. Damian's voice was deadly quiet. This is between us, Thomas. She's not part of this. She's the only part that matters. You'd burn the city for her. Victor proved that when he kidnapped her mother. So here's my offer. You give these organizations what they want: access to Chicago, seats at the council table, fair distribution of Victor's territories. And in exchange, Elena walks out of here unharmed. And if I refuse, then my associates take her. Use her to leverage concessions from you piece by piece. It would be unpleasant for everyone, but it would be effective. Elena's mind raced. This was the play. Thomas hadn't tried to kill Damian because he didn't need to. He'd just found the one thing Damian couldn't defend against, his attachment to her. You fucking coward, Elena said, her voice shaking with rage. You can't beat Damian straight up, so you're using me as a hostage? That's pathetic. That's practical, Thomas corrected. Same lesson Damian taught Victor. Find the weakness, exploit it, win. He looked at Damian. So what's it going to be? Negotiate or watch her suffer? Damian's expression was stone. You're making a mistake, Thomas. A terminal one. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, I'm holding all the cards. Your woman, your men neutralized, 4 guns pointed at your chest. You're not walking out of here without agreeing to my terms. I'm not his woman, Elena said suddenly. I'm his partner. There's a difference. Thomas laughed. Semantics won't save you, dear. No, but this might. Elena moved fast the way Roman had taught her, closing the distance to the nearest gunman before he could react. The letter opener wasn't much, but she'd learned where to strike. She drove it into the man's gun hand, felt it scrape bone, heard him scream. His weapon hit the floor. Elena grabbed it. Everything happened at once. Roman fired, taking out another of Thomas's men. Damian drew his weapon and put 2 rounds in a third. The 4th man swung his gun toward Elena, and she fired without thinking, muscle memory from hours on the range taking over. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him backward. He dropped his weapon. In 4 seconds, Thomas's advantage had evaporated. Damian crossed the room and put his gun against Thomas's temple. You were saying something about holding all the cards? Thomas's face had gone ashen. Damian, wait. We can still negotiate. Negotiate? Damian's laugh was vicious. You just tried to kidnap my partner. You allied with outside organizations against the council. You neutralized my men and threatened Elena's life. What exactly is there to negotiate? The council will investigate my death. They'll demand answers. They'll get them. You attempted a hostile takeover using outside forces. That's treason under our rules. The council will vote to sanction your death posthumously. Damian's finger tightened on the trigger. Any last words? She made you weak, Thomas spat. That's all I wanted you to see. Victor saw it. I saw it. Everyone sees it. Damian Vesper, the unstoppable crime lord, reduced to a lovesick fool who'd sacrifice his empire for a woman. Elena expected Damian to pull the trigger, expected violence and blood and Thomas's corpse hitting the floor. Instead, Damian lowered his weapon. You're right, he said quietly. Elena is my weakness, but she's also my greatest strength. You want to know why? He turned to look at Elena, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition. Because she sees things I miss, makes decisions I wouldn't consider, brings perspective I don't have. Victor underestimated her and died for it. You're making the same mistake. He looked back at Thomas. I'm not going to kill you. Elena is. The words hung in the air like a detonation. Elena's hands tightened on the stolen weapon, the metal slick with sweat and someone else's blood. What? She whispered. You wanted to be my partner, equal authority, equal responsibility. This is what that means. Damian's voice was absolutely steady. Thomas tried to use you as leverage, tried to kidnap you to control me. You want power in this world? You want respect? Then you handle the people who threaten you directly. Thomas's eyes went wide. Damian, be reasonable. Shut up. Damian didn't take his eyes off Elena. This is your choice. Pull the trigger and prove to everyone in this city that Elena Vesper isn't someone to be fucked with. Or don't, and accept that you'll always be seen as my weakness, my liability, the soft spot people exploit. Elena's heart was trying to break through her ribs. The gun shook in her hands. Thomas Morrison stared at her with naked terror, his breath coming in short gasps. Please, he said. I have a family, a daughter, grandchildren. Please don't do this. So did Victor, Elena heard herself say. Didn't stop you from voting for his death. That was different. That was business. This is murder. It's all murder, Thomas. You just called it business when it wasn't your life on the line. Roman had positioned himself near the door, watching, but not interfering. The wounded men groaned on the floor, clutching their injuries, but nobody moved to help them. This was Elena's moment, her test, her transformation. She thought about Sienna Carzon crying in a coffee shop, her life destroyed by her father's choices. Thought about her own mother, lying in a hospital bed, broken by Elena's father's gambling. Thought about every moment in her life when she'd been powerless, when men had made decisions about her future without asking her opinion. Thomas Morrison had tried to kidnap her, use her, turn her back into property to be traded and leveraged. Elena raised the gun and pointed it at his head. Wait, Thomas's voice cracked. We can make a deal. I have money, connections, information, whatever you want. Name your price. There is no price, Elena said. You made me a target. You threatened my life to control Damian, and now you're going to learn what happens to people who do that. Her finger found the trigger, tightened, started to squeeze. Elena. Damian's voice cut through the moment. You don't have to do this. If you can't, if this is too far, I'll handle it. No judgment, no loss of respect. Elena's hands stopped shaking. The clarity that came was sudden and absolute. Damian was giving her an out, a chance to maintain her humanity, to stay on the side of the line that separated survivors from monsters. All she had to do was lower the gun. She met Thomas's eyes, saw the hope flickering there, the desperate belief that she wouldn't do it, that she was still good, still salvageable, still too soft for this world. My name is Elena Vesper, she said quietly. Remember it, because it's the last name you'll ever hear. She pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Thomas Morrison's body jerked backward, a red flower blooming in the center of his forehead. He hit the floor with a wet thud, his eyes still open, still registering shock even in death. Elena lowered the weapon slowly. Her hands were steady now, her breathing even. She felt nothing except a strange, cold satisfaction. Check his phone, Damian said, his voice businesslike, as if Elena hadn't just committed murder. Find out who else was involved in this coup? Names? Organizations? Anyone who knew about tonight. Roman moved to comply, stepping over Thomas's corpse like it was furniture. Elena watched him work, watched Damian scan through messages and contacts, watched the other wounded men stare at her with new understanding. She was dangerous now, proven, the woman who'd killed a council member in cold blood. Marcus and Alexei are downstairs, Roman reported, unconscious but alive. Looks like they were drugged, not beaten. Get them medical attention, then dispose of the bodies. Make it look like Thomas and his associates disappeared. No bodies found, no evidence. Damian walked to Elena and took the gun from her hands gently. How do you feel? Nothing, Elena said honestly. I thought I'd feel something. Horror, guilt, regret, but there's just nothing. That's shock. It'll hit later, when your body processes what happened. Will it? Damian studied her face. Maybe not. You're stronger than most people, colder when you need to be. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. He pulled her close, and Elena let herself lean against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. You just killed a member of the council. That's going to have consequences. Questions. Investigations. Let them investigate. We have Thomas's phone. We know he was colluding with outside organizations. We can prove he committed treason. We can, but it's still going to be messy, dangerous. The other council members will want answers. Then we'll give them answers. The truth. Thomas tried to stage a coup. He threatened your partner. He allied with enemies of the council. And I killed him for it. Elena pulled back to look at Damian. Or is the truth not good enough? The truth is perfect. You are perfect. He kissed her then, and it wasn't gentle or romantic. It was possessive and desperate and tasted like blood and gunpowder. When they broke apart, Roman had already called in a cleanup crew. Professionals who would make Thomas Morrison and his associates vanish without a trace. The kind of people who did this work so often, it was routine. We need to go, Damian said, before anyone else shows up. The council will meet tomorrow to discuss Thomas's disappearance. You'll need to be ready. I'm ready. They left the warehouse, stepping over spent shell casings and blood splatter that would be gone within the hour. Marcus and Alexei were being loaded into a medical van, both men still unconscious, casualties of Thomas's betrayal. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. Elena stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, replaying the moment she'd pulled the trigger. Thomas's face, the sound of the gunshot, the way his body had fallen. She felt nothing. Was that normal, or had she broken something fundamental inside herself that could never be fixed? You did what you had to do, Damian said, reading her thoughts. Thomas was a threat. Threats get eliminated. That's the rule. I know the rule. I'm just trying to figure out if I care that I followed it. And I think the old Elena, the one who existed before you, would be horrified, traumatized, probably screaming in a corner somewhere. She turned to look at him. But I'm not her anymore. I'm someone who can pull a trigger and feel nothing. Is that strength, or have I just become a psychopath? You're a survivor who's adapted to her environment. There's a difference. Is there? Damian's hand found hers in the darkness. Yes, because you can still ask the question. Psychopaths don't worry about whether they're broken. They just are. It was probably the most comforting thing he could have said. Elena squeezed his hand, holding on like he was an anchor in a storm. When they reached the penthouse, Anna was waiting with first aid supplies and anxious questions. Elena waved her off, heading straight to the bathroom. She stripped off her clothes, blood-spattered, ruined, and stood under scalding water until her skin turned red. She kept expecting to break down, to cry, to feel something about having taken a human life. Nothing came. She dried off and dressed in clean clothes, then joined Damian in his office. He was already on the phone, making calls, doing damage control, arranging the pieces to survive tomorrow's council meeting. The vote will be split, he said when he hung up. Marcus Chen will support us. David Kozlov is undecided. James Sullivan will probably vote against. He and Thomas were allies. We need David's vote to maintain majority control. Then we convince David. How? Elena thought about it, running through everything Roman had taught her about leverage and psychology and power dynamics. We give him what he wants, Thomas's territories, all of them. We offer David full control of everything Thomas owned in exchange for supporting our version of events. That's a significant concession. It's a necessary one. We can't afford to have the council split on this. If we lose majority support, they could vote to remove us both. Better to sacrifice territory than power. Damian smiled, and it was genuine. See? This is why you're valuable. I was thinking about threatening David. Leverage, force. You went straight to negotiation. Because threats would make him defensive. But greed? Greed makes people cooperative. Spoken like a true criminal, I learned from the best. They worked through the night preparing their case, gathering evidence from Thomas's phone, building a narrative that would satisfy the council's questions. By dawn, they had a plan. The council meeting was scheduled for noon. Elena dressed carefully, a black suit that Anna had selected, severe and professional, with her hair pulled back and minimal makeup. She looked like someone who belonged in boardrooms making life and death decisions. She looked like someone who'd killed a man 12 hours ago and slept fine afterward. The meeting was held at the same downtown building as before. Security was doubled, everyone on edge after Thomas's disappearance, rumors already circulating about coups and betrayals and violence. Marcus and David were already seated when Damian and Elena arrived. James Sullivan showed up 5 minutes late,
his expression hostile. The empty chair where Thomas should have been sitting felt like an accusation.
"Where's Thomas?" James demanded immediately. "Dead," Damian said bluntly. "Killed last night when he attempted to stage a hostile takeover using outside organizations." The silence that followed was absolute. "Explain," Marcus said finally. So Damian did. He laid out Thomas's conspiracy, showed the text messages proving coordination with organizations in Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, and Indianapolis. Explained how Thomas had tried to use Elena as leverage, how it had ended with violence.
"And who killed him?" David asked quietly. "I did," Elena said, her voice steady. "He tried to kidnap me, use me to control Damian. I defended myself." James's laugh was bitter. "Defended yourself? You executed a council member."
"I killed a traitor who violated our most fundamental rule. No alliances with outside organizations against council members. Thomas committed treason. The penalty for treason is death." Elena met his eyes without flinching. "Or are you saying you would have voted differently if we'd brought this to the council first?" James's jaw worked, but he didn't answer. "The question before us is simple," Damian said. "Do we sanction Thomas's death as justified punishment for treason, or do we investigate it as murder? I'll abstain from the vote given my conflict of interest. The rest of you decide." "I vote to sanction," Marcus said immediately. "Thomas's messages are clear. He was planning a coup. That's treason." All eyes turned to David. He looked between Damian and Elena, calculating, weighing options. "What happens to Thomas's territories?" he asked. "They're yours," Damian said. "Full control. All of them. In exchange for your vote." David smiled slowly. "Then I vote to sanction. Thomas committed treason. His death was justified." "James," Marcus prompted. James Sullivan stared at Elena with pure hatred. "You're all insane. This whole thing is insane. Thomas is dead, and you're just going to vote it away like it's nothing?" "Thomas was a traitor," Elena said coldly. "Vote with us or against us. But decide now." "I vote against," James said. "This is murder dressed up as justice, and I won't condone it." 2-1, Marcus said. The motion passes. Thomas Morrison's death is ruled justified execution for treason. His territories are redistributed to David Kozlov. This matter is closed. Just like that, it was over. A man was dead. His legacy erased, his territories carved up, and the council moved on like it was routine business. Because it was. This was the world Elena had chosen, where human lives were currency, where betrayal meant death, where violence was just another negotiating tool. The meeting adjourned. David shook hands with Damian, already discussing the logistics of territory transfer. Marcus nodded to Elena with something that looked like respect. James walked out without a word, but his expression promised future problems. "That went well?" Damian said when they were alone in the elevator.
"Did it? We made an enemy of James. He'll be plotting against us now." "Let him plot. We have majority support. He can't touch us. Until he finds new allies, builds a coalition, waits for us to make a mistake." Elena leaned against the elevator wall, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "This never ends, does it? The scheming, the threats, the violence, it just keeps going. That's the price of power, constant vigilance, constant defense. Is it worth it?"
Damian looked at her seriously. "You tell me. You just killed a man, convinced the council to sanction it, and helped redistribute his empire. Do you feel powerful?" Elena thought about it honestly. "Yes." "Then it's worth it." The elevator reached the ground floor. They walked through the lobby, Roman and his team forming their usual protective perimeter. Outside, Chicago blazed in afternoon sunlight. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that just floors above them, a murder had been sanctioned and an empire had shifted hands. "What now?" Elena asked. "Now we consolidate. Make sure David's transition to Thomas's territories goes smoothly. Keep eyes on James in case he tries something stupid. Continue integrating Victor's operations." Damian paused. "And we prepare for whatever comes next. Because someone will always come next. That's the rule." They drove back to the penthouse, the city sprawling around them like a game board. Elena watched it all pass by, thinking about Thomas Morrison's last words. "She made you weak." But he'd been wrong. Elena hadn't made Damian weak. She'd made him more dangerous, given him someone who could think tactically, who could pull triggers without hesitation, who could negotiate and threaten and kill as needed. Together, they were unstoppable. The question was, for how long? That night, Elena stood at the penthouse window, looking down at Chicago spread out below. 40 stories up, removed from the consequences of her actions, watching millions of people live their small, safe lives. She'd crossed so many lines, become so many things she'd never imagined. College student, to hostage, to accomplice, to partner, to killer. The transformation was complete. And the terrifying thing was, she didn't want to go back. Behind her, Damian was on the phone, already planning the next move, the next deal, the next consolidation of power. Always moving forward, always calculating, always 3 steps ahead. Elena turned away from the window and joined him, ready for whatever came next. Because this was her life now. This was who she'd become. And there was no redemption waiting at the end of this path. Only power, only survival, only the endless, brutal game of staying on top while everyone else tried to pull you down. Elena Vesper had arrived, and she was just getting started. 3 months after Thomas Morrison's death, James Sullivan made his move. It started with whispers. Rumors spreading through the organization like poison. Damian Vesper was losing control. His obsession with Elena had made him reckless, vulnerable. The council needed new leadership before everything collapsed. Elena heard the talk during a fundraiser at the Art Institute. She was standing near a sculpture, champagne in hand, when 2 of Sullivan's associates passed by without noticing her. "James says it's time," one murmured. "Damian's gotten soft. The girls turned him into something weak." "When?" "Soon. He's building support. Quiet. Careful. Won't make Thomas's mistake." They moved on, leaving Elena frozen in place, her pulse hammering. She found Damian 20 minutes later in a gallery discussing real estate deals with the city councilman. She waited until they were alone, then pulled him into an empty corridor. "Sullivan's planning something," she said quietly. "I overheard his men talking. They're building support for a move against you." Damian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "How long have you known?" The question caught her off guard. "I just heard them tonight. Why?" "Because I've known for 6 weeks." He straightened his cuffs, his movements controlled. "Sullivan's been making calls, meeting with potential allies, testing the waters to see who'd support a vote of no confidence. And you didn't tell me?" "I was handling it." "Handling it how? By letting him build a coalition against you?" "By letting him think he's building a coalition. There's a difference." Damian's smile was cold. "Sullivan's predictable. Ambitious, but not particularly creative. He's following Thomas's playbook. Find allies, isolate the target, strike when they're vulnerable. I've been watching him repeat the same pattern for weeks." Elena stared at him. "So, what's your plan? Turn his own people against him, make him look incompetent, force him to overreach before he's ready." Damian paused. "But there's a complication." "What complication?" "Your mother." The words hit Elena like a punch. "What about my mother?" "Sullivan's been watching her facility, surveillance teams twice in the past week. He's planning to use her the same way Victor did, as leverage to control you, to control me through you." Elena's hands clenched, nails biting into her palms. "When were you going to tell me this?" "When I had a solution, which I do now." Damian pulled out his phone, showed her a series of photographs. Her mother in the facility garden, her mother in her room, her mother being watched by men Elena didn't recognize. "I'm moving her tonight to a secure location Sullivan doesn't know about. She'll have round-the-clock protection, full medical staff, everything she needs." "And me?" "You're bait." Elena's breath caught. "Excuse me?" "Sullivan thinks you're my weakness, so we let him believe it. You attend events without heavy security. You visit your mother's old facility like nothing's changed. You give him the opportunity to make his move." Damian's eyes met hers. "And when he does, we destroy him completely. You want to use me as bait to trap Sullivan." "I want Sullivan to expose himself by going after you. Then we have concrete proof of his treason. Same play we used on Thomas, but this time we don't need to kill him. We just need him to violate council rules in front of witnesses. Elena processed this, her mind racing through the angles. And if something goes wrong, if Sullivan actually manages to take me,
He won't. I'll have teams positioned everywhere you go. Roman will be shadowing you constantly. You'll never be truly alone. Damian moved closer. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Elena thought about the past 3 months, about learning the business, about sitting in on negotiations and making decisions that affected hundreds of lives, about becoming someone the organization feared and respected, about killing Thomas Morrison and sleeping fine afterward. Yes, she said, I trust you. Good, because this ends tomorrow night. Sullivan's planning to make his move at the council dinner. He thinks he has enough support to call a vote of no confidence. What he doesn't know is that I've already flipped his allies. When he makes his accusation, he'll be standing alone. And if he's desperate enough to try something violent, Damian's smile was predatory. Then we give him the same mercy we gave Thomas. None. The council dinner was held at a private club overlooking Lake Michigan. Black tie. 300 guests. Politicians, business leaders, and criminals wearing expensive suits, all pretending they were legitimate. Elena wore a dress that cost more than her college tuition, midnight blue silk that made her look dangerous and elegant in equal measure. Damian's arm was steady under her hand as they entered the ballroom, Roman following 3 steps behind, his attention sweeping for threats. James Sullivan was already there, surrounded by associates, his expression confident. When he saw Damian and Elena, something flickered across his face, anticipation mixed with calculated hatred. The dinner progressed through multiple courses. Elena barely tasted the food, her attention focused on reading the room the way Roman had taught her. Marcus Chen was watching Sullivan with barely concealed disdain. David Kozlov looked bored. Sullivan's supposed allies were avoiding eye contact with him, which confirmed what Damian had said. They'd been flipped. Sullivan didn't know he'd already lost. After dessert, Marcus stood to address the room. Before we adjourn, James Sullivan has requested time to address the council. James? Sullivan rose smoothly, his smile confident. Thank you, Marcus. I'll be brief. For months now, we've watched Damian Vesper consolidate power at an alarming rate. Victor's territories, Thomas's holdings. He's accumulated more control than any single council member should have. And all the while, he's been distracted by... His gaze shifted to Elena. Personal attachments that compromise his judgment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elena kept her face neutral, but her hands clenched beneath the table. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence, Sullivan continued. Damian Vesper has become too powerful and too unstable to lead effectively. The council needs new leadership, leadership that isn't compromised by emotional entanglements. The room went quiet. Every eye turned to Damian, waiting for his response. Damian stood slowly, his movements controlled. James, I appreciate your concern. Really, it's touching that you care so much about the council's welfare. His smile was cold. But before we vote on anything, I think the council should know about your recent activities. Sullivan's confidence flickered. What activities? The surveillance teams you've had watching Elena's mother's medical facility. The meetings with outside organizations in St. Louis and Kansas City. The weapons shipment you arranged without council approval. Damian pulled out his phone, displayed photographs on the screen behind him. Sullivan meeting with known criminals from rival cities. Documentation of illegal weapons purchases. Surveillance footage of his men watching the medical facility. Those are fabrications. Sullivan's voice rose with panic. Are they? Because I have testimony from 3 of your associates confirming everything. They were very cooperative once they understood the alternative. Damian's voice was calm, relentless. You violated council rules against unauthorized surveillance of members' families. You made alliances with outside organizations without approval. You acquired weapons with intent to use them against council members. All of this is treason, James, just like Thomas. Sullivan's face went white. You can't prove any of this. I just did, in front of 300 witnesses. Damian looked around the room. Anyone want to dispute the evidence? Silence. Then I'm calling for a vote. All in favor of removing James Sullivan from the council for treason? Marcus raised his hand immediately. David followed. Around the room, hands went up one by one. Sullivan's supposed allies voted against him without hesitation, their loyalty purchased or intimidated away weeks ago.
The vote is unanimous, Marcus said. James Sullivan is removed from the council effective immediately. Security, please escort him out. Sullivan looked around wildly, seeing betrayal in every face. You fucking coward, he spat at Damian. You manipulated everything, turned everyone against me. This is all you're doing. Yes, Damian said simply. It is. You should have learned from Thomas. You can't beat me by playing the same game. I've been at this too long. I'm too far ahead. Security moved in. 4 large men who gripped Sullivan's arms and began dragging him toward the exit. He fought them, screaming accusations and threats that echoed through the ballroom. You think this is over? Sullivan shouted as they pulled him through the doors. You think you've won? You're going to die, Vesper. You and your whore both. I'll make sure of it. The doors closed, cutting off his voice. The ballroom remained silent for a long moment. Then Marcus cleared his throat. Well, that was dramatic. Shall we continue with the evening? Just like that, the tension broke. Conversations resumed. Waiters brought more champagne. The orchestra started playing again. James Sullivan's removal was already old news, filed away and forgotten. Elena felt Damian's hand find hers under the table, his fingers lacing through hers with unexpected gentleness. It's done, he murmured. Sullivan's finished. His assets will be redistributed. His people will scatter or join other organizations. You're safe now. Am I? He just threatened to kill us both. Empty threats from a desperate man. He has no resources left, no allies, no power. Within a week, he'll either leave Chicago voluntarily or someone will make him disappear permanently. Damian's grip tightened. You're safe, Elena. I promise. But the words felt hollow. Because Elena had learned something fundamental about this world over the past 3 months. No one was ever truly safe. There was always another threat, another enemy, another person willing to do terrible things for power. The dinner ended around midnight. Damian and Elena rode home in silence, Roman driving, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. I need to see my mother, Elena said suddenly. The real facility, where you moved her. I need to know she's actually safe. Damian nodded. Tomorrow. I'll take you myself. The facility was 2 hours outside Chicago, disguised as a private estate in a wealthy suburb. High walls, armed security that didn't bother hiding their weapons. Medical equipment hidden behind elegant furniture and expensive artwork. Elena's mother was in a sunroom overlooking a garden, reading a book, looking healthier than Elena had seen her in years. She looked up when Elena entered, and her face crumpled with emotion. Elena, oh, sweetheart, I've been so worried. Elena crossed the room and hugged her mother fiercely, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender soap and old grief. I'm okay, Mom. I'm safe. Are they treating you well here? They're treating me like royalty, private nurses, physical therapy. The doctors say I'm responding better to treatment than they expected. Margaret pulled back, studying Elena's face. But what about you? You look different, harder. I am different. I've changed. Because of him. It wasn't a question. Margaret glanced toward the door where Damian waited in the hallway, giving them privacy. Elena, it's not too late. You could still leave, start over somewhere he can't find you. I don't want to leave. But you should want to. That life he's pulled you into, the violence, the crime, the constant danger, it's not sustainable. Eventually something will break. Someone will get killed. Maybe him. Maybe you. Elena sat beside her mother, choosing her words carefully. You're right. Eventually something will break, but not today, not tomorrow. And in the meantime, I have power I never had before. I make decisions that matter. I'm not invisible anymore. You were never invisible to me. To the world, then. To everyone who ever looked through me like I didn't exist. Elena's voice hardened. Dad gambled away everything. You couldn't work because of your illness. I was drowning in debt and desperation, watching my life narrow to nothing, and then Damian came along and gave me an option. He didn't give you an option. He bought you. At first, yes. But now? Elena shook her head. Now I'm choosing this. Actively. Knowingly. Because the alternative, going back to being powerless, is worse than any danger I face in Damian's world. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I don't even recognize you anymore. I know. I barely recognize myself.
Elena took her mother's hand. But I'm still your daughter. That hasn't changed. I still love you. I still want you safe and healthy and cared for. That's why you're here. That's why you'll always be protected. Protected like a prisoner. Protected like someone I love. Elena stood, kissing her mother's forehead. I have to go, but I'll visit again soon. And Mom, I know you don't approve of my choices. I know you think I've lost my way, but I'm happy. In my own twisted way, I'm happy. Can you accept that?
Margaret was quiet for a long moment, studying her daughter with ancient sadness in her eyes. I don't have a choice, do I? Just like you didn't have a choice when your father sold you. We're both trapped by circumstances we didn't create. Maybe. Or maybe we're both just surviving the best way we know how. Elena left before her mother could respond. Damian was waiting in the hallway, his expression unreadable. How is she? He asked. Heartbroken, but safe. Elena walked past him toward the exit. Let's go home. They drove back to Chicago in silence, Elena staring out the window, processing everything. Her mother's words had cut deeper than she wanted to admit. Because Margaret was right, Elena had become someone unrecognizable, someone capable of terrible things. The question was whether that transformation was a tragedy or a triumph. Back at the penthouse, Elena found a message waiting on her phone. Unknown number. She opened it and felt her blood run cold. Your father is in the hospital, St. Mary's, room 412. Thought you should know. A friend. She stared at the message for a long time before showing it to Damian. It's a trap, he said immediately. Sullivan trying one last desperate play. Or it's real, and my father is actually dying. Does it matter? Marcus Vale sold you to settle his debts. He destroyed your life to save his own skin. You owe him nothing. I know, but I still need to see for myself. Damian studied her face, then nodded. Fine, but we go prepared. Full security. At the first sign of trouble, we leave. St. Mary's Hospital was on the south side. The emergency room busy with the usual Friday night chaos, gunshot wounds and overdoses and domestic violence victims. Elena and Damian moved through it all with Roman and 4 other men forming a protective perimeter. Room 412 was in the cardiac wing. The man in the bed looked nothing like Elena's father. Marcus Vale had always been larger than life, loud, charismatic, always working an angle. The person hooked up to monitors and oxygen was skeletal, his skin gray, his breathing labored. But it was him. Elena recognized the scar above his left eye from a bar fight 20 years ago, recognized the tattoo on his forearm from his Navy days. Dad? She said quietly. Marcus's eyes opened slowly. It took him a moment to focus, but when he did, recognition flickered across his face. Elena, you came. Someone sent me a message, said you were here. Must have been one of the nurses. I gave them your number, just in case. His voice was a rasp, barely audible. Doctors say it's my heart. Too many years of stress and bad decisions finally caught up with me. Funny, I thought your bad decisions only destroyed other people's lives. Marcus flinched. I deserve that. I deserve worse. I'm a terrible father, a terrible person. I know that now. Do you? Because it seems like you only know it now that you're dying and need forgiveness. I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. Marcus coughed, a wet, painful sound. I just wanted to see you, to tell you I'm sorry. For everything. For gambling away your future. For selling you to Damian Vesper. For running away like a coward instead of facing what I'd done. Elena stared at the man who'd given her life and then destroyed it, feeling nothing except cold assessment. Are you actually sorry? Or are you just scared of dying alone? Both. Can it be both? I suppose it can. Elena moved closer to the bed, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. You want to know something, Dad? You selling me to Damian was the best thing you ever did for me. Not because it was good, but because it forced me to become strong, to stop being a victim, to take control of my own life in ways I never could when I was just trying to survive your chaos. Marcus's face crumpled. Don't say that. Don't tell me the worst thing I ever did was actually good. Why not? It's true. You destroyed my innocence, shattered any illusions I had about fairness or justice, showed me that the world is brutal and the only way to survive is to be more brutal than everyone else.
I learned that lesson well, Dad. Better than you ever did. Elena, please. No. You don't get to beg for comfort now. You made your choices. You lived your life, and now you get to die knowing that your daughter survived despite you, not because of you. Elena turned to leave, then paused. I'm not going to your funeral. I'm not going to mourn you. When you die, you'll just be gone. Another failed gambler who bet everything and lost.
She walked out without looking back. Damian followed silently, Roman and the security team falling into formation. They made it to the elevator before Elena's composure finally cracked. She didn't cry. She just stood there shaking, her hands trembling, her breathing coming in short gasps. Damian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with surprising gentleness. You did well, he murmured against her hair. That took strength. Did it? Or was I just cruel? You were honest. There's a difference. The elevator descended, carrying them away from Marcus Vale and his deathbed apologies. Away from the last connection to Elena's old life. By the time they reached the ground floor, Elena had forced herself calm again, her breathing steady, her hands still. Marcus Vale died 3 days later. Elena got the call from the hospital but didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail. Deleted it without listening. Damian found her standing at the penthouse window, staring out at the city. Your father's lawyer called. There's no estate, no assets, just debts. They'll cremate him and scatter the ashes. No funeral, no ceremony. Good. He doesn't deserve one. Elena, don't. Don't tell me I should feel something. Don't tell me I should grieve or forgive or find closure. He sold me, Damian. He destroyed my life to save his own ass. And now he's dead, and I feel nothing except relief that he can't hurt anyone else. Damian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, when my father died, I felt the same way. Relief. My father was a violent drunk who beat my mother until she couldn't take it anymore and disappeared when I was 12. When he finally drank himself to death 10 years later, I didn't go to his funeral either. Everyone said I'd regret it, that I'd need closure. They were wrong. Sometimes the closure is just knowing they can't hurt you anymore. Elena turned to look at him, seeing something in his expression she'd never noticed before. Understanding, recognition. They were both children of failed fathers, both shaped by abandonment and betrayal. Both survivors who'd learned to be ruthless because the alternative was destruction. We're the same, she said quietly. Aren't we? Both of us damaged in the same ways. Yes. That's why this works. Why we understand each other. Damian moved closer. Most people can't handle this life. The constant danger, the moral compromises, the knowledge that you've become something most of society would consider monstrous. But you and I, we were built for it, shaped by our pasts into exactly what this world requires. Is that love, or just compatible dysfunction? Does it matter? Elena considered the question honestly. No, I suppose it doesn't. He kissed her then, and it wasn't gentle or romantic. It was desperate and claiming and real. When they broke apart, Elena felt something settle inside her, a decision made, a path chosen with full awareness of where it led. Marry me, Damian said suddenly. Again. But this time for real. Not a transaction, not an obligation, a choice. Equal partners building an empire together. Elena stared at him. Are you serious? Completely. The first ceremony was a farce, a business deal masquerading as marriage. I want to do it right this time. With you choosing me the same way I'm choosing you. We're already married, legally. Legally, yes, but not in any way that matters. I want you to stand beside me and promise yourself willingly. Not because you were forced, because you want to. His hands cupped her face. Say yes, Elena. Choose this. Choose us. Elena thought about everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the violence, the transformation from victim to predator, the blood on her hands and the power in her voice, and the empire they'd built together from the wreckage of other people's lives. She thought about her mother's tears and her father's deathbed apologies, and all the people who'd looked at her with pity and assumed she was broken. Then she thought about the woman she'd become. Dangerous, powerful, unbreakable. Yes, she said, I choose this. I choose you. I choose us. The ceremony happened 2 weeks later. Not in a cathedral with forced witnesses and cold efficiency. In a private garden behind the penthouse, with just Anna and Roman and Marcus Chen present. No photographers, no publicity, just two people making promises they actually meant. Elena wore a simple white dress, nothing like the elaborate gown from the first ceremony. Damian wore a dark suit, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. Marcus Chen officiated since he was the only council member they both trusted. His words were brief and practical, stripped of romance or idealism. "Marriage in our world isn't about love," he said. "It's about alliance, trust. The willingness to stand beside someone when everything goes to hell. Damian, Elena, you've already proven you can do that. This ceremony is just making it official." There were no traditional vows. Instead, Damian and Elena spoke their own truth. "I promise to stand beside you," Damian said, "to protect what we've built, to trust your judgment, to never lie to you about the dangers we face, and to make sure you always have a choice, even if that choice is to leave." Elena's turn. "I promise to be your equal, your partner, to challenge your decisions when I think you're wrong, to support you when you're right, to share the burden of what we've become, and to never pretend we're something we're not." Marcus pronounced them married. No kiss, no celebration, just two damaged people acknowledging what they'd built together from darkness and violence and impossible choices. The reception was dinner for 5. Anna had cooked Damian's favorite meal, something his mother used to make before she disappeared. They ate and drank expensive wine and talked about business and territories and the constant chess game of maintaining power. It was the least romantic wedding celebration imaginable. It was perfect. That night, Elena stood at the window one last time, watching Chicago glow in the darkness. Damian joined her, his arm wrapping around her waist. "Any regrets?" he asked. Elena thought about the question honestly. "About marrying you? No. About who I've become? Sometimes. But not enough to change anything." "That's the most honest answer I've ever heard." "I learned from the best." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body. "What happens now?" "Now we run our empire. Make more enemies. Survive more threats. Build something that outlasts us both." Sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also powerful, meaningful, better than the alternative. Which is? Being invisible, powerless. Just another face in the crowd wondering if life will ever be more than just surviving. Elena nodded, understanding completely, because that's what she'd been before Damian. Invisible, powerless, drowning. And now she was dangerous, feared, a woman who could walk into rooms full of predators and hold her ground. Was the cost too high? Probably. Would she pay it again? Absolutely. "I love you," she said, surprising herself. The words came out honest and unplanned. Damian tensed slightly. "Elena, I know. Love is weakness in your world. It makes you vulnerable, gives enemies leverage. I understand all that. But I'm saying it anyway because it's true. I love you, not in spite of what you've made me, because of it." Damian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I love you too. In whatever way people like us are capable of love. It's probably twisted and unhealthy and everything therapists warn against, but it's real." Real enough. They stood together at the window, two predators who'd found each other in the darkness, watching their city spread out below like territory to be claimed and defended and ruled. 6 months later, the council voted to expand. New members from Detroit and Cleveland, organizations that had tried to move against them during Thomas's failed coup. But now they were allies, brought into the fold through negotiation and strategic marriages and the slow, careful work of building an empire that spanned multiple cities. Elena sat at the council table as an official member now, the first woman in the organization's history. Some members resented it, others respected it. All of them feared it, because Elena Vesper had proven herself in blood and violence and ruthless calculation. She wasn't Damian's wife in any traditional sense. She was his equal, his partner, his most dangerous weapon. Sienna Carzon had been absorbed into the organization too, managing several of her father's old legitimate businesses. She'd proven surprisingly capable once she accepted her situation. She and Elena had developed a cautious alliance. Not friendship exactly, but mutual understanding between two women who'd been thrust into darkness and learned to navigate it. Elena's mother remained in the private facility, her health slowly improving, still heartbroken over her daughter's choices, but accepting them with quiet resignation. She'd never fully understand what Elena had become, but she was safe, protected, cared for. That was enough. James Sullivan had disappeared completely. Rumors said he'd fled to Mexico. Other rumors said he was dead in a shallow grave outside Chicago. Elena didn't know which was true and didn't particularly care. He was gone. That's what mattered. The empire expanded, grew, adapted. Damian and Elena ruled it together with brutal efficiency and careful strategy. They made enemies, survived assassination attempts, destroyed rivals who underestimated them. They were powerful, dangerous, unstoppable, and they were happy in their own twisted way. 2 years after the second ceremony, Elena stood in the penthouse nursery watching Anna assemble a crib. Her hand rested on the small swell of her stomach, feeling the flutter of life growing inside her. A child. Her child. Damian's child. It should have terrified her, bringing a baby into their violent world. But Elena had learned something fundamental over the past 2 years. The world was always violent, always brutal. The only variable was whether you raised your children to be victims or survivors. She would raise a survivor. Damian found her there, his expression shifting when he saw where her hand rested. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "It's not too late to reconsider. I'm sure. This child deserves to exist, to have parents who are strong enough to protect them, who understand how the world really works." Elena met his eyes. "We can give them that. Power, protection, truth. And love? In whatever way we're capable of it. Yes." Damian's hand covered hers on her stomach, his touch gentle. "Then we'll build something worth inheriting, an empire stable enough that our child grows up safe, protected, never vulnerable the way we were. Never powerless. Never powerless," he agreed. They stood together in the nursery, two predators planning the future, preparing to bring new life into a world built on violence and fear and impossible choices. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no redemption arc, no moment where Elena and Damian renounced their criminal ways and became better people. They were exactly what they'd always been, survivors who'd learned to thrive in darkness because the alternative was destruction. But they were together, partners, equals. And in their own brutal, honest way, they were happy. 5 years after that first ceremony, Elena Vesper stood at a council meeting, her daughter playing quietly in the corner with Anna, watching her mother work. The little girl was 4 years old with her mother's determination and her father's calculating intelligence. She would inherit an empire, learn its rules, become powerful in her own right. The cycle would continue. Elena looked around the council table, at faces she'd learned to read, at predators she'd learned to outmaneuver, at an empire she'd helped build from violence and blood and ruthless ambition. This was her life now, her choice, her victory. Not the victory she'd imagined as a young college student with dreams of normal life and quiet happiness, but a victory nonetheless. She'd survived, adapted, conquered. She'd become the monster the world had tried to make her, and she'd done it willingly. The meeting adjourned, decisions made, territories claimed, the endless chess game continuing as it always did. Elena gathered her daughter and headed home, to the penthouse fortress 40 stories above the city, where Damian waited with dinner and wine and quiet conversation about the day's battles won and lost. Normal, in their own way. Happy, in whatever way people like them could be happy. And safe, for however long safety could last in a world that never stopped trying to destroy you. Elena Vesper had come so far from the terrified girl in a wedding dress who'd counted seconds walking down an aisle toward a man she didn't choose. That girl was gone forever, buried beneath blood and violence and transformation. In her place stood someone stronger, harder, dangerous. Someone who'd learned that survival sometimes meant becoming the thing you feared most. Someone who'd made peace with that transformation. Someone who'd chosen darkness because the alternative was drowning in powerlessness. The city glowed below them as night fell, millions of lives playing out in the streets below, completely unaware of the empire that ruled from above. Elena stood at the window one last time, her daughter asleep against her shoulder, Damian's arm around her waist, feeling the weight of everything they'd built and everything they'd destroyed to build it. Any regrets? Damian asked, repeating the question from their wedding night. Elena considered it honestly, the way she always did, looked at the blood on her hands and the power in her voice and the child in her arms who would inherit both. No, she said finally. No regrets, only choices, and I'd make them all again. Even the worst ones? Especially the worst ones, because they made me who I am. And who I am is exactly who I need to be. Damian kissed the top of her head, understanding in a way few people ever could, because he was the same, forged by violence into something unbreakable. Together, they watched the city they ruled, the empire they'd built, the future they'd carved from darkness. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't salvation. It was survival in its purest form. And for people like Elena and Damian Vesper, that was enough. The end. Epilogue. 10 years later, Elena Vesper walked into a council meeting with gray starting to thread through her dark hair and her daughter, now 14 and already learning the business, at her side. The empire had grown, expanded to 6 cities, absorbed rivals, built alliances that spanned the entire Midwest. Damian sat at the head of the table, older but no less dangerous, his gray eyes still sharp with calculation. Around them sat the new generation, children of council members, protégés, survivors who'd proven themselves worthy of power. The game continued. It always would. But Elena had learned something over the past decade, something she'd tried to teach her daughter. Power wasn't the goal. Survival was. Power was just the tool. And she'd become a master craftsman. The meeting began. Decisions were made. The empire rolled forward like it always did. And Elena Vesper, college student turned hostage, turned accomplice, turned partner, turned queen of a criminal empire, sat at that table and ruled with the same ruthless efficiency that had kept her alive when everyone expected her to break. She hadn't broken. She'd become steel. And that made all the difference.